Never sweep your home at night on the REZ. That's another rule. Did you grow up with this? We did. We were always told to clean before bed. No dirty dishes. No mess left overnight. Whenever we stayed over with my grandma, she always had these strict rules that we had to follow. I remember she said, if you don't wash those dishes, the devil's gonna come lick them clean. He's gonna sit there in your kitchen, licking every single one of them while you sleep. And if you leave that floor dirty, he's gonna dance in it. Dance around your whole house while you're over there snoring. Do you want that? So clean it up. I'm not sure how true this might be, but this scared me as a kid. I could imagine something like that happening while I was asleep. My grandma would always tell us these things whenever we went over. My cousin was always over there as well. He, on the other hand, was like, Grandma is just saying this to get us to clean the home and teach us some responsibilities. Which sort of made sense a bit at that time. Why? Because as we all did, I always questioned it. She had a long list of rules. Don't sweep at night. Don't brush your hair after dark. Don't whistle at night. Don't say your own name out loud. Don't cut your hair at night. Don't look at the moon too long. Don't shower after someone has passed away. Don't look out the windows at night. Don't look at mirrors at night. Don't walk barefoot outside after dark. Whenever I would ask why, she would just say, because you're not supposed to. Don't be asking why all the time. Just listen. And just like everything else in life, we as stubborn humans are hard-headed. And I learned this the hard way. I think I was around 14 or 15 at this time. My cousin was a bit older than me. I think he was like 17 or 18. Me and my cousin were playing cards late. Another rule, but I won't talk about that one right now. Eating snacks. When my cousin got all loud because he finally won a game, he stood up and somehow hit the table, and he spilled some of the food on the floor. He grabbed the broom and started laughing. Well, let's see if your grandma's devil comes out and dances, he joked. He grabbed it like a mic stand. Not only this, he started somewhat dancing with the broom as well, tiptoeing and dancing with it. I started laughing because he looked so funny doing it. I don't know if she had a camera, a mic or something, even though this was back in the 90s, but I swear, she knew everything that was going on simply by hearing. So Grandma yelled from her bedroom, "Stop." We froze and just stared at each other. Then she shouted again. Well, not really, more like she whispered. I'm not sure if that makes sense. She was loud but in a low voice. I told you, you don't ever sweep at night. You want something to follow you in here? Or are you trying to invite it yourself? My cousin just stood there holding the broom. We weren't even laughing no more. You know how as kids, whenever we got in trouble, we would sort of be laughing while getting chewed out. It was like that, but somehow, we knew she was being serious. Put it down and go to bed. Now, you hear me? Don't you dare open that door tonight. Tonight? Why would I open the door tonight? Anyways, back to smirking, because my stupid cousin over here was acting up, but he let the broom down real slow, and then we just went straight to our mats. I'm not sure what time it was, but I woke up to the sound of something. It was coming from outside. I opened up my eyes, and I could hear it. I sat up, and when I did, I swear my cousin scared the fuck out of me. He was sitting up, eyes wide, just staring at me. I did ask him what he was doing. My cousin was like, "Did you hear it?" he whispered. "There's something outside." He sounded scared too. For a split second I thought maybe it was Grandma getting us back. But I know she wouldn't be doing this. They're not the ones to joke about this. We both looked towards the doorway. It sounded like it was coming from the front door. My cousin lay down, trying to see if we could see something through the crack underneath the door. I also did the same. I remember it happening so fast. Something walked by. A shadow. Then, 3 slow knocks. We panicked. I'm not sure how she could see, Or maybe she was there with us the whole time. But I swear they have like a sixth sense for these type of things, because Grandma yelled from the room again, "Don't open that door. Lay back down and don't say a word." We laid there frozen. The sound outside didn't stop. It sounded like somebody was sweeping. Maybe I was just paranoid and just confused this with the sound of footsteps. But at some point it did sound like somebody was dragging something. Every now and then, we would also hear the footsteps. My cousin whispered to me, but I told him to be quiet. I didn't want Grandma to hear, and I didn't want whatever that was outside to hear us. After what felt like hours, it finally got quiet. No sounds, no noises, just the sound of the wind outside. But not one of us closed our eyes for that night. Well, maybe for a few minutes, because in the morning, Grandma was already in the kitchen counter doing something, making a bunch of noise. She didn't even say good morning. She grabbed her smudge bowl, lit the cedar, and walked straight over to us. She smudged me and my cousin, saying some things under her breath in Navajo the whole time. Sitting there like you didn't do nothing wrong. You two think you're cute, huh? Sweeping at night, acting like smartasses. Now look what you brought. Next time they come knocking, I swear I'm gonna open that door myself and drag your asses out there. I'll let them know it was all on you. When she finished with the smudge, she looked at us again and said, "You think I made up these rules? You think I just like yelling at y'all? This is why I tell you, don't sweep at night." But no, you don't listen. Now look at you. You went and brought it right to the door. We just stood there quiet. After that day, me and my cousin never spoke about this again. A few years ago, I did ask my grandma again, and the only reason why is because I used to tell my friends the same thing she told us growing up. Don't sweep at night. Some of them said that they never heard of it before, while others said that they had never understood why. By now we were much older. I sat down with Grandma one night, and after some small talk and just having a good time, I did ask her, and what she said made perfect sense to me now. First she was like, "So now your hard-headed self still wants to know, huh?" She shook her head and chuckled. "All these years, and you still can't let it go. Alright, sit down. I'll tell you. When you sweep away the negative. We know these things. But never, never sweep at night. And never sweep out the door. Back then, in the old Hogans, the floors were dirt. People would sweep the inside towards the center and out through the doorway in the mornings to start fresh for the day. But at night, you never swept out the door or took out the trash. It's all tied together. Hair might be in that pile. The bad spirits can use it. They take it and put some bad medicine on you. Even one little strand, just one. That's all it takes. Don't be stupid, you hear me? Never leave clothes hanging out at night. Don't leave the dirty dishes out at night. Nothing goes outside that is personal, belonging to you, because they can take it and use it against you. They, or you know who. Well, y'all stay safe and leave those brooms alone at night. I've been sitting on the story for a while. I haven't spoken a word of it to any of my buddies in fear of ridicule, but I see so many people sharing stories about their experience in the woods, and I think I have a pretty good one. Not in a bragging sense, but something different than the normal. I came across something in the woods while hiking or camping overnight, especially given our situation and what actually happened. A long time ago, I did a survival training course with the Army, where you learned everything that you need to know in order to live in the woods for an extended period of time, especially if you down your aircraft. The course covered everything from wild edibles to signaling overhead aircraft for help. Maybe you heard of it. Seer School. It was broken into 4 different phases, with the hardest being the field phase. which also included the final test. And like everything else in life, you learn it first in the classroom, go through some training, and then comes the real test, simulation. By the way, I am now in my late 60s. I've been through hell and back since then. I dealt with just about everything life throws at you. Divorce, losing your parents, having your kids and your grandkids, who are now all grown and don't want to come see you or even talk to you. And I'll tell you right now, none of that pain or fear compares to that week in those woods. Or maybe, now that I think about it, maybe I just haven't dealt with it after this long. Because honestly, writing this is making me feel a certain way. In a positive way, that is. So we were to hike 10 miles into the woods. We were to find a clearing and set up camp. Sounds pretty easy, right? Think again. You have to do this with nothing but a combat knife, fuel rations, and a very basic med kit for 5 nights. This was no camping in the woods field trip. You would have to do this on your own, and that's what made it so brutal. There was no help, no backup plan. You were dropped off miles away from anyone else and told, see you in 5 days at the extraction point. There was no satellite phone, no radio, nothing. It wasn't like, if I hear something crawling outside at night, or if I see something standing at the tree line, I'll just pack up and leave. You couldn't leave. There was no exit, no ranger stationed down the trail. It wasn't some weekend camping trip where you could just leave if things got too scary. This was basically stay there and survive. If the forest went dead silent at night, you stayed. If you heard footsteps circling your shelter, you stayed. If you did see something from the tree line, you stayed. That was the whole point of the exercise, to get you down to the basics and force you to rely on nothing but your training. You had no one to talk to, just the woods around you. And every time that the sun set, the dreaded night would come. You were by yourself. To top everything off, we were told that because of an incident last year with somebody not being able to handle the pressure of being alone in the woods, the combination of loneliness, being bored, and sometimes the creepy thoughts that you aren't going to be rescued, can take even the most confident outdoorsman mad. We were told to remove our belts and leave them at base. Basically, somebody hanged themselves last year. It was weird given that we could still have our combat knives. But hey, that's the army for you. So we drove up to our location. We were each given a specific grid and some numbers showing the extraction point for each of us. Each of them were at least 5 miles away from any other person. We were given directions to hike to our location. Mine was almost an 8-mile hike through wooded marshland. Everything was important, because that's where we would be picked up after the 5 nights. So I got my bearings, planned out what I was going to do for a shelter, and I settled in for my 5-night stay there, completely by myself. Since the weather was good and it was only 5 nights, and I figured I would focus more on the food and water collection. Water wasn't hard to find. There was a stream just outside of my camp. I put all my effort that first day into setting traps to catch some small game, pitfalls, rabbit snares, and deadfall traps. I figured that if I'm going to set some traps, I may as well set something to catch me a deer. Basically, I bent a strong tree branch back and attached sharp spears to it connected to a tripwire system. I was very proud of my work. It would have definitely taken down a medium-sized deer. Everything was pretty uneventful the first few nights. Aside from hearing wolves howling in the distance, it was quiet. For the first time in my life, I heard nothing but the sound of the woods. Everything was going well, except shit hit the fan on the 3rd night when I heard the swing trap go off. It made a hell of a noise when it hit the tree beside it, which was actually discouraging. It meant that it didn't hit the target. I woke up that morning late in the day. The sun was already high in the sky. The first thing on my mind was to check my small game traps. I hadn't had anything to eat since the 2nd night, and the only thing on my belly was water. I went over to reset the swing trap, and that's when I saw something strange. There was blood on one of the spears. The wound must have been deep, The blood covered the first 2 inches of the spear. I then noticed something strange near the trap, what looked like some sort of print, some animal or human footprint. I hadn't taken my boots off outside the shelter, and there's nobody around for miles. I then start feeling a bit uneasy, knowing that maybe someone is around and wounded. What was weird is that there was no trail of blood to follow, especially with a wound of that size. If it was a person, the trap would have hit him square in the hip. I decided to return back to my camp, and I snacked on some nearby cucumber leaves. It's a leaf plant that tastes like cucumber. A wave of guilt washes over me, thinking about the blood and what it must have been. What if I killed an innocent person, or maybe some hermit living on these woods? But I was given strict instructions not to go more than 200 feet outside my grid bubble. I forgot to mention that I'm not sure how true or feasible this is, but they told us that there would also be role players who camouflage themselves and check on us just to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to. And then, about an hour later, I hear a helicopter circle overhead for about 5 minutes. It lands about a mile or two away from me, and then it just leaves very quickly. They must have been picking up my victim or something. The fortnight was quiet. No sound of bugs, no wolves in the distance, no wind, nothing. It was the closest thing to silence that I ever heard. Out of nowhere, every hair on my body stands on end, almost like the air around me was electricity. I felt like somebody was watching me, not just that uneasy feeling you get when you're alone in the woods. I didn't just feel, I knew that somebody was watching me. A quick gust of wind blew over my shelter. The air was freezing cold. I could see my own breath. That's when the deer trap goes off again. It doesn't hit the tree this time. I'm scared. I'm not leaving the shelter to investigate. Fuck that. Suddenly, something breaks the silence. Somebody coughing, but it was unlike anything I ever heard a person make before. It was almost mechanical, almost like the voice of someone with the electronic voice box. There was a cough every 2 seconds or so. The coughing was the only sound. There was no background noises from the woods. I then built up the courage to look through the entrance of my shelter to see what is making that noise. When I look, just outside is a foot with jeans around the ankle. I'm petrified. That's when I heard it. A voice, low, hoarse. It said my name. Frozen in fear, I didn't respond. I didn't say anything. And then it said my name again. My whole body felt locked in place. And then came that cough again. The same mechanical, rough cough. I was frozen. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. Then it sounded like someone kneeling down, right at the entrance of my shelter. I didn't move. But then it spoke again. More clear this time. You know what you did to me. Whoever, or whatever this was, started laughing, but it didn't sound human. It then said, I know you didn't mean to, but I still need you to come out. At this point I wanted to scream, but I couldn't say anything. That's when I started hearing some scraping sounds, something dragging on the dirt. Then came the sniffing, the smelling sounds. At this point I just closed my eyes, and then it said something that I will never forget. I'll see you again, next time. Not even sure how I fell asleep. I think my whole body just shut down from the fear. For the next day and night, I ended up staying in my shelter, too afraid of whatever was out there to leave. I was woken the 6th day by my sergeant. It was past noon, on the hike back to base. I did ask him about the helicopter, and he told me not to worry about it. I let it go for about 10 minutes before asking again. He noticed that I was concerned. It was a body recovery. Captain J hung himself with a rope that he made. You were friends, right? He asked me like he knew the answer was yes. But then he handed me a small note. It was a paper, At least what looked to be one. The size of a sticky note. It said, "Hey man, I tracked him to your site. I know I shouldn't have, but I did." He kept coughing and whispering in some foreign tongue that I never heard before, but somehow I could understand. He wanted somebody. He told me to do this to save you. The man with black eyes wanted you. When we got back to base, everything was confusing. They pulled me aside right away. I was escorted to a small room with 2 officers and a notepad. They started asking questions. Did you see him? Did you hear him? Did anyone come close to your camp? What do you remember each night? I told them everything that I could remember. And yes, even the coughing, the cold air, the print that I found outside of my shelter. They grilled me for hours. Had I broken grid and wandered outside my zone? Did I see anyone else in the woods? Could I confirm that the cough came from Captain J? I couldn't give him anything solid. All I knew was that someone or something was out there. After that, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They told me the official report listed Captain J's death as a mental health breakdown during survival training, but everyone else in my unit were talking about something else. There's shit out there in the dark that we don't know about, and that we don't need to go looking for. You see, I've been in the woods my whole life. I never personally seen all the monsters and shit that people say that they came across, but I am a firm believer in the gift that we have. The gift to perceive whether somebody is watching us. I read about 1,000 stories about the woods and what people had came across, and 100% of these stories always mention something about feeling of being watched. And you'll also hear that in pretty much any recounting of a dangerous situation, whether it's paranormal or something else. If anything, humans are really good at knowing when something or someone is tracking us. So I'll leave you with this. Never discount that feeling on the back of your neck as anything other than your body saying, "Hey, watch the fuck out. Something is trying to eat us." You know that feeling when you wake up in the middle of the night and you don't even know why? You're just laying there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why you're awake. Then you hear it. You ignore it. Don't pay no attention to it. Isn't that what our parents told us? Maybe you're laying in bed right now, relaxing. Maybe sitting there, scrolling on your phone. I have something to share that might just make you think twice next time you hear something. My friend told me the creepiest thing I ever heard, and now I just want to share this with you. It's nothing paranormal, by the way. At least I don't think it is. So maybe it's not scary, or maybe it is, depending on how you take it. So at some point my friend, I will call him Mark, he had came back to the REZ to visit. He had now become a city boy, but his family still lived out here. So when he came to visit his family, he would actually stay at his friend's house over the weekend, including my house sometimes here and there. On one Saturday morning, he came over to my place early. He was knocking. He said if he could spend the weekend with me, which I found strange. He would always let me know ahead of time, and I thought he made plans to spend the weekend with someone else. He told me that he did, but he decided not to after what happened last night at his friend's house. Not only did he say that, he seemed scared about it. I'm like, what the fuck? What happened? Mark told me that when he decided to spend the weekend at his friend's place, which he had already spent there a few times before, his friend's grandma also stayed there, but she had been in the hospital for some time now, so the home was pretty much vacant, which is why he would stay there, because it was only them. So when Friday night came, another weekend, he got his stuff and went over to his friend's home. He said that when he got there, well, let me describe the home for you, which is important. I also gone over a few times. I just wasn't that close to him. To my friend Mark I was, but not to the other guy. And the only times I went over was whenever our little original REZ clique hanged out together. So if I remember, You walk in through the front door, and right away you're standing in the living room. No entryway, just straight into the living room. To the left in the corner was this small kitchen area. It had a stove, a small fridge, and a desk as a counter. I'm sure everything was DIY or something. The living room, on each end, or wall, was a door. There were 2 bedrooms. One belonged to his friend, the other to his grandma. But like I said, Mark would stay over at grandma's room, since, she wasn't living there. The rooms, they faced each other, directly, separated only by the living room in the middle. And at the opposite of the main door, across the living room, there was a door that led out to the yard. Mark said that when he got there he was excited, because it was going to be another weekend of just hanging out, drinking and having a good time. When he walked into the home, he heard a noise coming from grandma's room. So he ended up asking his friend who else was there, and that's when his friend told him that his grandma was back from the hospital. However, she was real sick, bedridden, hooked up to a machine. She couldn't move around at all. She stayed in bed all day. She couldn't go nowhere because she had no legs, and she was just getting weaker. Now Mark told me that he also didn't mind helping his friend's grandma around as well, almost like a payback for letting him stay over, especially since she was wheelchair bound. With that said, they went outside, hanged out, played some video games, and they ended up watching a movie. They bought dinner, and by the time they went to bed, it was around 2 a.m. He said he remembers waking around 3 or 4, just randomly, but he woke up real thirsty, so he decided to go get a drink of water. It was dark, and he said grandma's room door was wide open, just like his friend kept his bedroom door open, which something was wrong as his friend needed to hear in case she needed help or something. He said he got the water, and he was walking back into the room when he heard a noise, a quick tapping noise behind him. He said he stopped for a moment, looked around, and nothing, so he assumed it was the machine hooked up to grandma. So right when he was gonna walk back into the room, he turned around. He heard the sound again, a bit closer though, like right behind him. He turned around. That's when he saw her, the silhouette of grandma running on her hands back to her room. My friend said that he got so scared that he quickly walked into his friend's room and shut the door. Now remember, his friend told him to keep the doors open in case she called out to them so that they could hear. Well, he tried to wake up his friend, but he was dead asleep, like snoring away. He even tried shaking him awake. Must have been too much drinking. Mark told me that if he could, he would have left right there and then, in the middle of the night. But what if that's just how she walks now to get around? He said hell no, fuck that. So he just laid down on the floor and didn't even go back to sleep. He said he was just up all night, waiting to see if anything happened. And sure enough, something did. The door to the bedroom opened, very slowly. By this time he said he was so scared that he was just waiting for her to walk in, on her hands. So he went over to his friend and started shaking him awake and explained everything. He said that his friend was confused and walked with him to the living room. They looked at grandma's room, and she's sitting on the bed with her hair down. His friend told him that that's what she does, but that she can't be walking, and that he must have been dreaming. Mark even told me that his friend started laughing at him, and for the rest of the night, or morning, he couldn't go back to sleep. After the sun rose, Mark and his friend got up. His friend took him to grandma's room, and she was laying there hooked up to a machine. That was the last time Mark went back to his friend's house. I'm not sure what to think about it. Maybe she used her hands as her feet and only moved around at night. Maybe she knew it would freak everyone out, seeing her go around the house that way. Maybe her time was nighttime to get things done. But that still doesn't make fucking sense. She would have to be strong to walk around like that. We did end up telling somebody else about it, and she told us that maybe it's her spirit running around and to not be scared. I'm not sure how to feel about this. What do y'all think? There's a few things you should know before I tell my story. First of all, I come from a Navajo line. In case you didn't know, Navajo women pass their teaching and sacred medicines onto their daughters and granddaughters. Second, there is only one maternal granddaughter in each generation of our family. I was my grandmother's favorite grandchild. She taught me everything she knew, lessons that to this day serve me well. When a grandmother speaks into a Navajo family, everyone, and I mean everyone, stops and listens to her. With that being said, my grandmother had one daughter and 4 sons. Her sons were something else. My grandmother married an Irish farmer and raised her family on a farm 30 miles outside of a small town on the Utah-Colorado border. They had 15,000 acres of pinto beans and wheat. Their farm actually bordered the Navajo Nation, of which they would visit often. Now, I was my grandmother's favorite grandchild. I was the only daughter of her only daughter. For whatever reason, my mother and grandmother were not close. So my grandmother took me to teach me her old ways. Someone to carry on our traditions and medicines. We would spend summers gathering cedar berries and making them into necklaces. We would gather all sorts of plants for teas, make sage bundles, and she would teach me how to survive on my own out in the forest. She poured all her wisdom into me. One summer, we had a family reunion. We all decided to stay at my grandmother's old farmhouse. All my cousins had come and we all decided to stay in the upstairs bedroom. That's a whole story of itself, but we were excited to be together and brave in numbers, right? The upstairs bedroom in the old farmhouse had a huge window that overlooked the farm. It was about 4 feet high and about 8 feet long. There was a door that opened up to the outside, but there wasn't a porch or stairs. If you went out that door, you would end up falling a complete story to the ground. Now, before it was bedtime, my uncle built a huge bonfire and all of us roasted marshmallows. My grandmother was initially okay with me going out to do this. However, she warned me to stay within the light of the fire and to not be wandering off. It was completely pitch black out there. There are no neighbors, no outside lights, and you wouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face if you had no light source like a flashlight or fire. We were all happy roasting our marshmallows and visiting. That's when we started hearing coyotes yipping in the distance. My mom and her brothers, hearing this, actually started howling back. See, my mother can mimic any animal noise on the planet. She was calling the coyotes up because we could hear them getting closer and closer. That's when my grandmother came out and got me. She told my mom to be quiet, and she told everyone else that you don't call out things in the night. They kind of just laughed it off, but continued after my grandmother took me inside. She got me ready for bed. I always slept with my grandmother. I knew I was always safe with her, but this being a special occasion, I wanted to sleep upstairs with my cousins. My grandma tried to discourage me from this, but I wouldn't be swayed. I was too excited. So my grandmother put my cedar berry necklace on me, and we went upstairs and smudged the whole room that I would be sleeping in. She told me that if I heard or saw anything, to run to her room as fast as I could. She also told me not to be making noises, and to be quiet and go straight to sleep. My cousins and I were all set in bed for the night, and we were laughing and talking. I reminded them of what Grandma had told me. We shouldn't be so loud, for something might hear us. My cousin Jay laughed it off and said it was just old Indian superstition. That's when he called out and started whistling. This sent chills down my spine. We were never to whistle at night, no matter what. Never whistle at night. We sat and waited a couple of minutes and nothing happened. I actually let out a sigh of relief. A couple of hours later, we were all about ready to drift off when my hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I looked around very carefully so I wouldn't draw attention. I didn't see anything, but I could sense it. At first it started very quiet. I could hear scratching on the outside of our house. I kept telling myself it was most likely just a mountain lion and that everything would be fine. We were on the second floor, so we were safe. But I still had goosebumps and was scared. I started to hear what sounded like claws softly crawling up the side of the house. I slowly rolled over to face the window. If something was going to come in, I wanted to see it first so I could be the first one out of there. I should have gotten up in that moment and gone to Grandma, but I'm not sure why I didn't do it. I thought I could handle whatever it was, I guess. It was a few minutes later, the door handle on the outside door started to jiggle. At first I was scared, then I thought, it's only my uncle. You see, our uncle was always playing scary tricks on us, and I thought for sure it was him. So I kind of chuckled thinking he's going to scare my cousins very good. So I slowly turned my head, and every single one of my cousins' eyes were wide open. This actually made me giggle a bit. I turned back around towards the window, and the door handle was still jiggling. It was then that my cousin C asked me to go look and see what it was. I said alright. I didn't want anyone to think I was a scary cat, so I got up and tiptoed over to the door. I grabbed the door handle very firm, so that whoever was messing with it couldn't turn it. I turned around and smiled at my cousins, and every single one of them had a look of fear on their face. At the time I thought, geez, what a bunch of scary cats. Then my cousin Jay started to say something, but the thing about Jay is that he had a bad stutter when he got too excited or scared. He started to stutter and pointed to the window. I slowly turned around, my hair still standing on the end of my neck and arms, and what I saw, well, let me tell you, I thought my uncle had outdone himself on the scary mask. There was the skull of a cow with just the eyes barely peeking over the window. Now, our window was open because it was hot, and I was standing right by it. A couple of things hit me all at once. The smell. There was this horrible smell of death. It was so bad I could hear my cousin B gag behind me. There was a cow skull that had 2 big horns on it, like a Texas Longhorn, but we didn't have that type of cattle. No one did, at least over here. Animalistic eyes that were staring straight at me. Slowly, very slowly, these long bony fingers made their way over the window sill. But what I couldn't stop looking at was the skull. It was wet. A smile broke over its face, as if it knew I was starting to realize this was not my uncle. It opened its mouth in a huge smile, showing dozens of sharp teeth that pointed inward, like those snakes that have teeth like that, so that when they start to eat something, it can't escape back out. The smile cracked its skin when it smiled, and there was this stuff that started to come out. It started to reach its hand towards me. The hand then started to smoke, like it was burning. It yanked its hand back out and gave me a look of hatred. That's when I thought how wise my grandmother must have been, that she went ahead and smudged the room. Then, its long bony finger with huge claws started to move its finger to call me over to it. It was now smiling again. I naturally reached up and held my cedar berry necklace. It saw this and its smile instantly changed. It let out this vile scream, and that's when I also screamed. Almost instantly, my uncle came into our room with his .44 Magnum. He saw it, and he blew a hole through the window. This thing then jumped and started to run off into the timber, screaming impossibly loud the entire way. My uncles then looked for it all night, planning to kill it, but they never found it. Grandma had me in her arms almost right away. Never again did I leave my grandmother at night. That scream will stay with me until the day I die, even though that was not the last time I heard it. The next morning, when we went outside, there were huge claw marks down the side of the house. I can't even begin to imagine what those claws could do to a human body. Thank goodness for my grandmother's wisdom. To this day, I still have my cedar berry necklace. And for you all, a word of advice from Grandma. Never, and I mean never, call out into the night, because you never know what's gonna answer you back. When I was young, I lived in a farm in Oregon with my parents. I was the only child. We weren't a big commercial farm, just a family type thing. We had 5 cows, 3 horses, a small herd of goats, 2 dogs, and 1 chicken coop. We also had some Indian runner ducks we kept mostly as pets. We didn't really make any money off the place, just enough to sustain the animals and a little extra for ourselves. Money enough to take a decent vacay every couple of years. Dad also had another job. He was an insurance agent in town. He was the only one around. The town wasn't more than about 1,500 people. Mom would also give horse riding lessons as well. We didn't have money. Well, we weren't rich, but we were pretty comfortable. It was really an easy life, or at least it could have been a lot worse. I went to school. Dad went to work. Mom took care of the animals. Then we all had dinner together every night, and I would go to bed while my mom and dad had a beer or two and watched the news. Sometimes at night I would hear things outside, mostly just normal stuff. The cows or horses would get spooked by a coyote or something, or I would hear the dogs chasing a rabbit, barking their heads off. Sometimes we would find a chicken dead. Dad would always tell me about it but never let me see the body. Even though I always wanted to see, he would keep me and my mom inside until he had gone out, did whatever he did with the body, throw sawdust over any blood, and then life would go on as normal. I always assumed it was foxes, as I had seen a couple of them out in the fields over the years, slinking around back and forth through the grass. The summer when I was 10 years old, I remember helping Mom change the bedding in the horse stalls, when we heard a huge racket going on outside. If you have never heard the sounds of a horse in pain, you don't want to. Trust me. It sounds almost like a person screaming. At least that's what we heard. And one of our horses came running into the barn with a wound on its left thigh. Long claw marks were running across its body for about a foot. It had blood running down its leg, and it was also limping. I was so scared by the sight of all that blood that Mom locked the horse in a stall and made me go inside with one of the dogs. She told me to lock the door and stay inside until she came in to get me, and so I did. Eventually, Mom came inside and told me that the horse had hurt itself on the barbed wire that ran the perimeter of the field. We owned more land beyond that, but it was mostly forested. I guess I believed her at the time. But at dinner that night, I noticed my dad was being more quiet, and Mom was talking a lot more than she normally did. I also noticed that my dad had gotten his rifle out and set it by the back door. He only does this when the coyotes had been acting up. But that night I went to bed as normal, but I had trouble falling asleep. I turned on my desk lamp and decided to read comic books until I got tired. I have a very vivid memory of reading X-Men and hearing the back door open. Looking out, I could see my dad by the porch light, lighting a cigarette and holding his rifle under his arm. He started walking over the driveway and then turned to follow the fence line. I couldn't fall asleep until I knew my dad was back safe. I kept coming downstairs with the excuse of getting water to see if my dad was back in the house yet. And every time that I did, I saw my mom sitting on the couch in the living room, staring at a blank TV screen and looking worried. Eventually, about 4 in the morning, I think it was around that time, my dad came back, and I was so tired and relieved that I fell asleep as soon as I knew he was home. He never told me what he did that night, but I never thought about asking him. 2 months later, I was back in school. It rains a lot in Oregon in the fall, and this day was no different. All I could hear from my bedroom was rain hitting the ground and the aluminum roof of the chicken coop. There was light thunder in the distance, but it was slowly getting closer. I thought I heard a coyote sapping out around the garage, or it could have been one of the dogs. I looked out, straining my eyes to see whatever it was. In a brief and distant lightning flash, I saw something. It looked almost like a person, but it was hunched over and with a long torso. It was tall, taller than my dad, who was about 6'4" at least. I just barely caught a glimpse of it on the near side of the garage. Then the light faded, and I didn't see it again that night. There was another dead chicken the next morning, the third one in just a few weeks. I told Dad what I had seen the previous night, and he just stared at me. Then he told me that the storm must have been playing tricks on me. I accepted that. 4 months after that, we lost a cow. It was in the middle of the night, and we all woke up at the same time. There was a lot of noise in the fields, but only briefly. The cry of a dying animal, a guttural yell that I had never heard before. I could hear him running up the stairs to my room. He had his rifle in his hand, and he opened the door. He saw that I was awake and told me to stay inside no matter what, and to try to go back to sleep. I don't think I have to say that sleep wasn't really an option anymore, but I did stay in my room with a blanket held tight around my shoulders and staring out the window. About 10 minutes later, I heard gunshots in the field. I'm not sure what he was shooting at, whether it was whatever had attacked the cow, or the cow itself, trying to put the animal out of its misery. My dad never talked about that night. I later found out that when he got to the cow, he found it ripped open on the ground, bleeding out from its torso. The shots I heard were him shooting the cow in the head. It kept going like that for years. A chicken or a duck here and there. Something bigger would happen very rare. I only ever caught glimpses of that thing until what comes next. It terrified me. It happened in the middle of the day, over the course of a long weekend when my parents had gone to Seattle to see my uncle, who was ill. It was on a Saturday afternoon. I was 17 years old. I was out in the barn putting out food for the horses and the dogs. The horses were running around out in the fields, and the dogs were asleep in the corner of one of the horse stalls. I heard something rustling in the tall grass outside in the field. The dogs looked around a little bit, but they didn't seem to mind. I assumed it was just one of the horses waiting for me to leave so that they could eat. I kept going about what I was doing, and after a few minutes, I thought I heard somebody breathing. I turned to look and it was standing in the door, tall as hell, even hunched over. The sun was streaming in behind it, lighting up all the dust in the air around it like some kind of sickly halo. It was looking at me, considering me. Maybe it was trying to decide whether or not I was food. I remember swearing, turning, and running as fast as I could for the house, not even thinking. Panic caused my legs to move. It was behind me, not even breathing hard. I heard its feet hitting the ground in a constant pattern. I got to the house, opened the door and slammed it behind me and locked it as fast as I could. I tore through the house, locking every door and drawing the blinds on every window. I could hear it snarling outside the back door. The dogs were barking at it, but they wouldn't try to attack the thing. It was too big and they knew it. It roared at the dogs and they ran off, most likely to hide somewhere. I went to my parents' bedroom and got Dad's rifle. I loaded it, set up a chair in the living room facing the back door, and waited. It started prowling around the house. I could hear its feet crunching on the gravel of the driveway and the wooden planks of the back deck. It kept walking back and forth. I thought about trying to look through a window to see it, but I was too scared. Eventually, after hours of hoping it would go away, the sun went down. I turned on all the outside lights and went up to my room. I opened my window with the rifle in my hands, hoping to be able to pick the thing off from above. I saw it lurking just beyond the glow from the porch light. It had very long arms, and it looked to be walking on bent knees. It was by the chicken coop. Then it disappeared from view. I heard the chickens making noises and screeching. The thing then reappeared with a dead, bloody chicken in its hands. It bit off one of the wings with jaws that were dripping with slime, and it let the dead bird drop to the ground at its feet. It looked at me. Its eyes made contact with mine. It turned away again, back to the chickens. It came back with another bird, mutilated in front of me, and dropped it. It went back again, and again. I should have taken a shot at it, but I was confused trying to figure out what it was doing. Then it hit me. It was a show of power. It was showing me that it was stronger than me. At the same time, I felt powerless and sick. Powerless because what it was saying was true. If it was just that thing in me, I wouldn't stand a chance. The thought that shook me out of this state was when I remembered the rifle at my side. It was heading back to the chickens, and I decided that when it came back, I would take my shot. It strode back to the porch, almost arrogant, walking on bended knees with those arms so long that the chicken was nearly dragging on the ground. I raised the rifle up to my eye, and I tried to steady myself. My heart was beating so fast that I could see the rifle shaking over me. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. It raised the body to its mouth, and just as it was about to put the chicken's head inside, I squeezed the trigger. The crack of the gun echoed in the quietness of the nighttime, and that's when I heard a painful, loud screech. I had hit it on the outside of the shoulder. It ran off into the night. It had killed a bunch of chickens and livestock like never before. I never saw it again. I'm writing all this now because my parents died 3 weeks ago. They were killed in a collision with a drunk driver. He survived, but they left me the farm, and I intend to live here with my own family. I'm 32 now, and I work for an Oregon Fish and Game office. I'm married to a wonderful woman named Stephanie. We have one son, Zachary, who is 4 years old. We are expecting a daughter in 4 months. I have come to the farmhouse alone today. I told Steph that I just wanted some time alone in my parents' house to deal with some emotions. She was very understanding. Now that I'm here, I have Dad's rifle next to me on the table, and it's almost nighttime. I have also brought several lights to set up around the house, and my own shotgun at that. I'm borrowing a hand from Joe, a guy at Fish and Game who I work with. When I'm done typing all of this up, I will print it out and leave it on the dining room table, along with my wedding ring and my key to the safe deposit box, where my will is kept. Everything is loaded and ready. Hopefully I return here to collect these things, and nobody will ever know I wrote this. But Stephanie, in the event that you are the unfortunate soul to find this, which I'm terrified because it seems like it's going to be the only outcome, the thought of you having to go on alone hurts me more than anything. Please know that I love you more than anything, and I hope you understand that I'm doing this to keep you safe. Zachary, I love you and can only hope you grow up to be a good and strong man, like your grandfather was. To my unborn daughter, if I don't live long enough to meet you, it will be the single greatest regret of my life. Tell the police, tell Fish and Game, call Joe. He's one of the few people who knows about this. Make this situation known. Eventually, someone will kill it, even if it's not me. Goodbye, for now. A little over a month ago, my wife Sam had received an urgent phone call from her mother. Apparently, her father had an accident at work and had suffered some injuries. Sam's father was a good man, very hardworking, and for the majority of his life, he has worked in steel processing plants. He was the type of guy who would say, "If you aren't getting your hands dirty, then are you even working?" According to her mother, one of the pallets of steel had buckled and came crashing down. Some of these smaller shards of metal were sent flying and struck her father in the leg and arm. He was taken to the hospital and was forced to stay there for a few days. Sam and I live in a secluded house, deep in the woods surrounded by thick underbrush and trees. We moved here a few years ago, enjoying the peace and isolation from the city. Our nearest neighbor is miles away, and the only sounds that we hear are the rustling of leaves and the sounds of critters at night. Sometimes you'll find some strange noises, like some coyotes, I guess, or who knows what else is out there. You'll have to go explore the woods by yourself to find out, 'cause I'm not going out there. We love that we're in the middle of nowhere, you can say, surrounded by trees. We aren't dumb. We're not gonna go look into the woods when we hear some strange noises. And we both agree that the day that we see something weird, or something happens, we're definitely gonna move out of here. But aside from all of this, it's the perfect place. Living out here, of course, has a few challenges. Self-service is spotty, and any trip to the grocery store or town takes about an hour. But we love the solitude and the feeling of being one with nature. And aside from everything else, the place wasn't that expensive when we got it. It was basically a deal. We do live a few states away from her parents, so having to find the time to visit was quite challenging. It seemed like we could only visit the family when Thanksgiving or Christmas came around, and sometimes not even then. However, the moment that Sam found out her father had been injured, she dropped everything and made travel arrangements. I wanted to go with her, but my work didn't give me the time off. Even during these times, they seem to have the mentality of, if you don't wish to work, then we'll just find someone else who will. To say I was upset was an understatement, but I just bit my tongue and headed home, only because I needed the job at the moment. Sam assured me that it would be fine, that I shouldn't worry myself. I knew she was trying to put myself at ease, but still, I felt terrible. She left for the airport about a week after she had received the news. Meanwhile, all I could do was work and try my best not to worry. Sam did her best to update me through her stages of travel. She arrived later in the evening and told me she had made it to her parents' house around midnight. Over the course of the next few days, she kept me updated on her father's condition. He had a few minor shards removed and was just spending time healing. He was scheduled to be discharged from the hospital after only a couple of days. Meanwhile, Sam was doing her best to help her mother around the house while they waited for him to come home. During this time, my job seemed to be piling on project after project. I could see myself turning into some sort of workforce zombie. Before I knew it, nearly a week and a half had passed since Sam had left. I checked my phone and looked at the calendar. Sam would be coming home the following day. She told me that since the flights were such a short notice, that she would be arriving very late in the evening. She said she would just grab a cab home and that she would see me in the morning. I wanted to stay awake for her arrival, but as soon as I got home from work, I made the mistake of falling on the bed. The next thing I knew, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I cracked open my eyes, excited to see Sam sleeping next to me, but as I reached over, I found that she wasn't there. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand to check and see if she had left me any messages. I thought that maybe her flight had gotten delayed and that she would be arriving either today or tomorrow. But when I turned it on, I received no new messages since the previous night. I got out of bed and I was in the middle of sending Sam a text message, asking her if she was alright, when I was nearly startled out of my skin by someone standing in the kitchen. I turned on the light, and after a few seconds, I recognized Sam was standing there holding a cup of coffee. I quickly walked over to her and embraced her, telling her how glad I was that she had made it home safe. She just returned a faint smile and set her mug down. I asked her what time she made it in, and she said only a couple of hours ago, but that she didn't want to disturb me while I was sleeping. I thought this was strange, as she knows better than anyone else how heavy a sleeper I am. She let out a soft sigh before telling me that she was starting to feel pretty tired herself. I told her once again that I was glad she was back, but that I was going to get ready for work. I quickly got changed and grabbed my bag from the counter. When I did, I noticed something else strange. The mug that Sam was holding that she had set down on the counter was empty. But not just empty, I'm talking about spotless, like there had been no liquid ever poured into it. Normally when she has coffee there are some coffee stains on the inside of the mug, but it looked as if she had just pulled it out of the cupboard. Maybe she just rinsed it out, I thought as I continued my way out of the door. After a long day at work, I returned home in the evening and pulled into the driveway. As I was walking up to the front door, that's when I noticed a few deer standing at the tree line, looking towards me. This was weird. From the day that we moved here, we never seen any deer, but I just brushed it off. I walked through the front door and locked it. It did creep me a little bit, as I heard so many stories about deer in the woods and whatnot. I locked the door, and as I was shuffling off my bag, I felt like I wasn't alone in the living room, despite not seeing anybody. As my eyes drifted around, I noticed that Sam was sitting on the couch looking at the TV. I started to walk over to her, starting to tell her about the deer that were outside. When I got right beside her, I asked her what she was doing, and she just kept staring at the TV, gave a faint smile, and said that she was watching the news. I glanced over at the TV and back at her. The TV was off. I asked her if she was feeling alright, and she just shook her head saying that she was fine. I couldn't think of anything to say, but I was far too exhausted to press any further. I told her I was going to jump in the shower and then go to bed early. She said alright, and that she would come to bed later on. As I was heading down the hallway, I stopped and glanced back at Sam, who seemed to resume watching the black TV screen. I took a very long shower after that, and after I finished, I opened the door to the bathroom. I jumped back in fright at the sight of Sam standing mere inches away on the other side of the door. I asked her what she was doing, and she just smiled, saying that she had to use the bathroom. Clutching my chest, I told her she should have just knocked like always, and she just chalked it up to her forgetfulness. As I walked by her, I told her if she went to go see the deer outside, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, those deer, they're long gone by now. Most likely back home." I just looked at her and walked away. That was weird. As I laid in bed, I couldn't help but wonder if something happened to her while she was visiting her parents. She had been acting strange ever since she had returned home. I tried to rationalize it as maybe just being exhausted from travel, or maybe dealing with her father took more of a toll on her than I thought. The next couple of days passed by and it was filled with much more strange behavior from Sam. I would find her just staring off into space or in strange places throughout the house. For example, one day I found her just standing in the closet, like if she was thinking on what to wear, but she was just standing there for an extended amount of time. However, Sam also started going out into the woods, something she never did. Hell, something I never even did. I would ask her about it and she would tell me to stop being scared, saying that there was nothing out there in the world that could hurt me. And the deer, I started seeing more and more deer just standing at the tree line whenever I would get home, staring. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I walked into my house. On another day, one early morning, as I was leaving for work early that day and it was still semi-dark, I found a deer that had been killed, but the way it was dead was disturbing. Its eyes were missing, leaving behind hollow sockets. Since I was rushing to work that day, I got in the car and texted my wife to call animal control, the game warden, or somebody, as I didn't want to be late again. I couldn't get the image of that dead deer out of my head. I knew something was going on, and I was ready to talk to my wife about leaving this place. However, everything changed last night. I had been startled awake by a noise at roughly 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't place the sound in my mind, so I got up and noticed Sam wasn't in bed. I called out to her, asking if she was around. After hearing no response, I got out of bed and began making my way towards the door. I walked around the house checking every possible room that I thought she could be in. After coming up empty-handed, I started to worry. That's when I caught a glance out of the window, overlooking our backyard. Someone was standing out there in the dark. As I drew closer, I noticed that it was Sam. She was standing in the center of the backyard looking up at the sky, and she appeared to be talking. I quickly rushed out to her and asked her what she was doing. She seemed to snap to her senses and stared at me, and told me she was just talking to herself. I glanced around and saw no one nearby. It was pitch black outside. You couldn't even see the tree line. I guided her back inside and managed to get her back to bed. Right up until I drifted off, I was beginning to worry something was seriously wrong with Sam, and was considering calling a professional for help. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, I entered the kitchen to get a cup of coffee, and I saw Sam standing next to the window staring out towards our backyard. I asked her if she was alright, and she just nodded to me. Just before I went out the door, I realized I had forgotten my phone on the nightstand. I quickly rushed back into the bedroom to get it. When I did, I noticed I had a missed phone call. They were calling in regards to my wife. I called the number back and confused, I asked about my wife. They informed me that my wife was in an accident and had been in the hospital for the past week. I was beyond confused by this point as I told them they must have made a mistake. They then transferred the call to my wife's hospital room, where she answered the phone, and I heard Sam's voice come through the receiver. She told me that she had been in a car accident on the way home from the airport. She didn't remember much aside from landing and getting a cab. I asked why they didn't contact me sooner, and she said that her purse and phone with all her identification had gone missing during the accident. She was in and out of consciousness for the majority of the week. That's when I felt my heart start to quicken as she told me something about the crash. Something that she neglected to tell anyone else, because they would think that she's crazy. She said that on the day of the accident, she saw someone appear on the dark road. The cab driver swerved out of the way and ended up crashing into a ditch of overgrowth. She said she could feel herself fading in and out of consciousness. But right before, she saw a figure stand over her. She said it looked like an alien. Very smooth and gray skin that seemed to have a wet-like appearance to it. The face was nearly featureless, with 2 small slits for eyes and pinpoints in the center for nostrils. She then let out a slight chuckle, saying that it must have been a product of her accident. I wanted to laugh along with her, but my throat was dry. She told me that the doctors would be releasing her the next day, and that I could come pick her up. I then apologized for not being at her side, and she told me it wasn't my fault, that I had no way of knowing where she was. She told me she had to get some rest but was excited to see me tomorrow. I agreed and hung up the phone. I stood there in the bedroom, gripping the phone tightly, trying to stop my body from shaking. If Sam was in the hospital, then who the fuck was in my living room? I opened the bedroom door and walked down the hallway. A cool breeze brushed against me as I noticed the living room window was open. The same window that the Sam who had been here the past week had been standing in front of. I'm not sure who or what that thing was that was copying my wife. I just hope to God that it never comes back. I got on the phone with my boss and I explained to him the situation of my wife being at the hospital. I did have the mindset of fuck this job, so I was waiting for him to tell me anything. To my surprise, he told me to do what I had to do to take care of my wife, and that was it. I quickly started packing boxes of clothes and essentials, as my plan is to move the fuck out of these woods before whatever this thing is comes back. I've been lying down for hours now. It's 5:35 a.m. and there's not much I can do. You know what the worst part about my situation is? I'm in the same room as my parents. They keep looking at me, and I can't help but look back and try not to cry or scream. Their eyes are focused on me and their mouths are wide open. There's a strong scent of blood and I feel paralyzed with fear. Here's the thing though, the second I make any hint that I'm not asleep anymore, I'm completely screwed. I will die and there's nobody around to save me. I've been trying to think of a way out, but the only idea I got is to rush for the front door and scream for help, hoping that a neighbor hears me. It is risky, but if I stay here, I'm gonna die. He's waiting for me to wake up and see his masterpiece. You might be wondering what's going on. Well, I do sometimes get ahead of myself sometimes. About 3 hours ago, I heard screaming from the other side of the house. I got up and went to check on the noise before realizing I had to use the bathroom, instead of doing the smart thing and going to investigate. I could have gotten myself killed right then for my stupid actions. I did my business and took a peek outside the bathroom. There was blood on the carpet. I got worried and ran back to my room, hiding underneath the sheets, terrified. I tried to convince myself to go back to sleep, that it was just some really vivid dream or something. But then I heard my bedroom door open. Like the scared child I was, I looked from under my blankets to see what was going on. I could see something dragging my dead parents into the room. It wasn't a human. I can tell you that. It didn't have hair, with no eyes or clothing. It walked like a caveman, with its back slouched as it dragged my parents. But this thing was smart, more than a caveman. It knew what it was doing. It propped my dad up on the edge of my bed and made him face me. It then sat my mother down in the chair and positioned her towards me as well. It then started rubbing its hands on the walls, staining them with blood, and then drew a circle with the devil's pentagram in it. To finish it off, it scribbled a message into the wall that I could not read in the darkness. It then positioned itself under my bed, waiting to strike. The scariest thing now is my eyes have adjusted to the darkness since then, and I can read the message on the wall. I don't want to look at it. It's terrifying to think about it, but I feel like I need to see, at least before I'm killed. I look at the creature's masterpiece, and it says, "I know you're awake." I work security at Disney World. Well, I used to. Most of the time I don't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online. But I just don't think I can tell the story without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Sometimes there would be a fight to break up, but people usually keep it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last couple of years, so I started asking to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. The working conditions were better as far as climate and comfort go. The guest issues were trickier. I guess the expensive and stress of vacay got to a lot of people, and I would be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I would try to recommend that they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would sometimes calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I got to get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago I got a call from management. Apparently a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. and all of the items of the guests were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on, but during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacay. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family, dad, mom, and 2 little kids. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I had easily found their vehicle, so that ruled out a car accident, or them choosing to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when the guest prepays for all their food. They were given a specific number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got there late and most likely just stayed on the resort. The next day they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney we have something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by the guest and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, a fast pass, and many more things. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park. They got on a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, It's a Small World, around 11 a.m. Then, nothing. It was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old coworker at Magic Kingdom and asked them to pull the security video for It's a Small World at the time they wrote it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused. He showed me what he found. There's always a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The video showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The video from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting, but they weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out, and mom and dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed, or possibly stuck in a machine somewhere, so we ended up shutting down the ride in the middle of the damn day. We turned off that damn music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find anything except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I called the police, and I suppose they're on the way. But the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There's photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to the account of the guest when the system knows that their picture has been taken. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle. But the rest of the pictures are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go around, so it appears as though this family has gotten on this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so damn confused. The next 10 to 15, I can see Dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting upset and crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they got out in the ride and tried to walk out. But the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around picture 450 or so, I only see the mom and the kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see Dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just Mom and 1 kid, another body in another seat. However, the mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think them 2 are still alive, looking straight ahead, pale. And y'all, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with this family. I can't look anymore. I closed the album. The file size has increased since I closed it. Are there new pictures being added? I see on security cameras that the local police department just arrived, so they're gonna take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family just disappeared. They didn't disappear. I know where they are. I had been a hunter for most of my life. Leading up to this incident, the smell of the warm air and the beauty of nature always had me at ease. I never felt scared alone at night because I have seen everything there is to be scared of. I have seen bears the size of a small car and animals so vicious They would kill anything that moved. The one thing I was never scared of was deer. I heard the tales of the Skinwalker, the Wendigo, and pretty much anything in between. My uncle was an expert in tracking and hunting. We always went on trips together and would always come back with a fresh kill. He had something about him. It was a rule. I remember it because it was weird. He never wanted to go hunting in winter. I never asked why. I'm not sure, but something about it always had me on edge. One day, it was winter, and I was about to go deer hunting when my uncle stopped at my front door. When he came in, he saw my packed supplies and my rifle, and knew I was about to go hunting. He immediately burst into a raft of anger as he dragged me to a wall and got into my face. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" His spit went all over my face as he looked at me crazy. He looked primal, as if he was fearful of something that he did not want to share. It was the same face you would expect a child to make if they were dumped in the middle of nowhere. The same face of fear that you see in people who have PTSD. I calmly brushed them off and got to the door saying I was going to go hunting. I was not about to fight with my uncle and ruin this trip, as I hadn't gone hunting for close to a month. When you start hunting, you get adjusted to it, and then when you go on breaks, you actually miss it. As I got into my truck, my uncle peered at me out the window. He was there to take care of my house, but before I reversed, he left with the door open. My uncle is prone to outbursts, as I should mention. He's only ever done it a few times, and it's always in a situation where the reaction suits it. Not this one, however. What was so bad about hunting in the winter? The spot I had planned was an isolated one. It was a huge forest area, which I had not been to before. I obviously had mapped the area out and brought essential survival tools in case the worst came, but I never thought I would have to use it after all those years out in the forest. When I arrived, the crisp, cold air immediately saturated me in discomfort. I quickly got another layer of clothes on before I started to walk to where I would set up camp for the night. The clearing I had chosen was a pretty tight one. There was a big tree in the center that stood above the rest. It was called the Forest Star, which suited it. Around the clearing, the forest was extremely dense. Almost no sun shone through the top. There was a small hunting tower north of the entrance of the clearing, so it was a direct walk from camp. As I walked ahead, I noticed something. There were small droplets of blood littering the ground. My first thought was that it must have been an injured animal or something like that, but the droplets were small and almost even. I shook the thought out of my head and made it to my setup, and I started to pin my tent. When I was done, I checked my watch. It was around 5:30 p.m. I had around 2 hours for hunting before it was pitch black, and so I made it to the tower. When I undid my rifle from its case, I heard scampering. Shaking it off, I took my spot and waited. As I stood there, time almost slowed down. I was in a precise focus and was ready for anything. I wasn't ready for what I saw though. Out came 2 small bucks that seemed injured. There were small droplets of blood coming from their eyes. As I focused in, I saw that it wasn't dry blood. It was fresh, and it was oozing from their eyes. I was shocked. I had never seen anything like it. Many different scenarios ran through my head. I was thinking, had a hunter shot both of them in the eyes and managed to not kill them? But the scenarios I was coming up with seemed more unlikely than the last. I took aim at the closest one and shot it. It stood there for a second, just not moving. Then they trotted off as if nothing happened. Blood was running from the wound, so I know I had obviously hit it. but it didn't seem scared nor fazed. I decided that was enough and sort of jogged to my side. I was freaked out and decided that I would cook dinner and go to bed early. When I scampered around my pack, I pulled out a can of beans. I grabbed a pot and started a fire and began cooking them. As I cracked open a beer, the familiar sound of a branch snapping sounded off next to me. I thought it was maybe a small deer, and I brushed it off as I sat and relaxed. I was thinking about the deer, and I started to chalk it up to the fact I must have not hit it deep enough, and the deer must have been in shock. When I finished eating, I went to bed. I was shivering in the night cold, and I could feel my body shaking uncontrollably. As I dozed off after a brutal 2 hours of cold, I heard another snap. This time, however, it was more loud, like a bear. I immediately grabbed my rifle and went out of my tent. My fire burned low, and in the distance I saw 2 red lights. I walked towards it when my mind started to race. Something felt wrong. As I closed the distance, my gut was literally twisted. My mind was anxious and I felt like I was about to break down. Then I realized what was wrong. Those weren't lights. They were 2 big solid red eyes. They were just orbs hovering. When I realized, I stood frozen. I thought it was a big cat, but what emerged was so much worse. Its fur was black, darker than the night around us. Its antlers were twisted and uneven, but the worst part, it was crying blood. Deep red droplets were pelting down in its unnatural eyes. I couldn't make a sound. I was frozen in fear. Then it started to make sounds. The sounds of a baby crying. It was horrible. The sounds of unnatural cries filled the cold air, making it worse. My body felt crumpled, and so I finally broke out into a sprint. When I looked back, it stood there. It wasn't even breathing, but the sounds of that baby crying weren't fading. It was like a speaker was attached to my ear. When I made it back to camp, I rushed to pack my stuff. In a hurry, I ran, leaving the tent behind, and I rushed to my truck. As I fumbled with the keys, I saw that something was walking slowly towards me. That's when the whispering started. Terrible, faint voices echoed throughout the forest. As my mind started to close, I felt my cerebral melting, as anything I tried to do would not happen. It was like sleep paralysis. As I stood there, I found the strength to finally open the door and get in my car. I slammed the door shut, and that thing was right at the window. I started to sob as I jammed the keys in the ignition. My mind felt fried as I swerved out of there. I didn't care if I hit anything. I just wanted to be away from that thing. And then, before I could back out, it stood up on its legs, and it repeated a voice I recognized.
You did not escape. The forest are mine.
It was my grandpa's voice. He died when I was 6, and I never knew any of the details. The thing then made a terrible shrieking noise that hurt my entire body. As it did so, I heard scampering as more of those things came out. They had blood running from their eyes as well. The baby cry started again, and that's when I finally drove out of that fucking place. When I raced home, I barged into the door. My shoulder ached, but I didn't care. I shoved my door and locked it and ran into my kitchen. That's when I saw my uncle sitting at the table, enjoying a small glass of scotch. So, you saw what I saw, didn't you, Anthony? I couldn't form a single word. I was so shocked. My uncle came up to me and said, "What you saw out there, It's my rule that I abide by. There are things in those forests in winter that are so horrible that even the most seasoned can't handle it. I saw it when I was a boy, and since then, I will never go hunting during winter. I finally mustered a sentence. What was it? He took a small sip before sitting me down. You saw something called Urbarak. It's an old, ancient being that dwells in the forest during these winters. Hunters who see it never are the same again, but some never even come home. I was lucky. My uncle sort of sniffled as he told me about his encounter with Urbarak when I was 23. My father and I went out into the woods on a very cold winter to hunt. Our family was struggling, so we didn't have much food. When we were hunting, my father called out to me, but before I could even get to him, I heard him yelled out before he fell silent. I never saw him again, but what stood there was worse than the loss of my own. A deer with red eyes, black fur, and twisted antlers stood there. Blood was running from its eyes. Then it started to cry like a baby. My uncle stopped and had to take a second before continuing. I comforted him as I was teary-eyed. It ran after me, Anthony, on two legs. It was like a human, and I rushed to get away from it. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a terrible red scar that ran across the entire underside of his arm. It was trying to feast on me. It knew I feared it, but eventually I managed to lose it. He finally finished his scotch before continuing. I was stuck in the forest for 3 days, fighting to survive. I heard its cries and whispers all around. As I tried to make it out, I finally arrived at a road and was taken in by the police. No trace was found of my father, except for one thing. They found blood at the scene and tested it. It belonged to my father. What was strange about it, it was mixed with his tears. Then my uncle finally stood up. Fear it, for it now knows who you are. Those were his last words. He left my house and the police found him wrapped up in a noose 2 days later. It broke me. My hunting buddy and best friend was gone. There was one detail about his suicide that was never resolved. He had droplets of blood coming from his eyes. The coroner's inspection said it was an aneurysm, but I'm not sure that is the truth. I'm 50 years old now, and I haven't been hunting in 2 decades. I can't even go into the forest anymore. I'm thinking about going back and seeing what Urbarak is. Maybe I can kill him. So beware of Urbarak, for he lurks in the forest, out in the cold. This happened back in 2016 or so. My ex at the time and I were road tripping around Utah. We started in Seagull Canyon by Thompson Springs north of Crescent Junction. It's a very cool, creepy spot with Native American rock art dating back to right around 2000 BC, almost 4,000 years ago. I would highly recommend it, but be warned, it's eerie, and I tend to believe Native Americans painted those petroglyphs as warnings of some sort. From there we hopped back onto I-70 and through Green River and then south on 24, which actually takes you right past Goblin State Park. It was about 2 in the morning by the time we got to Goblin, and my girlfriend was asleep with my dog Cookie in the back of my truck. So I decided to pull over to take a little break and stretch my legs. So I pulled over to the side of the road and got out to have a toke. And that's when I noticed something was off. It was too quiet. The night was too still. Just then, a deer ran out of the brush and nearly gave me a heart attack. Laughing a bit, I took a few steps out into the darkness so as to not wake up my ex. I unzipped to go, and that's when I heard my dog growling from the back of the truck. "Cookie, Cookie," I whispered. "Hush, it's just me." "Come look over here, baby." "What the?" My girlfriend's voice from out in the shadows. But when had she gotten out of the truck? And why hadn't I noticed her walk past me? "Lauren," I said, walking towards the voice. "Come look over here, baby," she said again. "Lauren, are you okay? What's going on?" I asked. Cookie's low growl then turned into a ferocious bark, which actually snapped me out of my trance. And that's when I heard Lauren, the real Lauren, from back at the truck. "Connor?" she said in a half-sleep state. "If that's Lauren, then who?" I was knocked flat on my back, and I looked up to see what looked like a half-lady, half-coyote creature peering down at me. Her eyes were somehow beautiful, with a soft white glow to them that reminded me of winter. Her nose was long and looked like a coyote, but without the fur, and she had long white teeth protruding out from her mouth. She had 2 tall pointy ears on the top of her head, and she appeared to be wearing a coyote pelt around her shoulders. She tilted her head to the side before opening her mouth, revealing a row of dagger-like teeth. Her lower jaw was hanging down in an unnatural angle, and she looked like she was making it bigger to bite my head off or something. That's when Cookie came bolting out of the back of the truck, slamming into the creature with some considerable force, knocking her off me. That's when I saw the rest of her body. She was long, at least 6 feet, and she had a full bushy tail, but her hands and feet were those of a human woman. Her body was wrapped in furs, but you could see black and red stripes painted on her naked body in between the patchy pelts. She then started to kick Cookie off of her and ran off into the bush. I ran over to make sure Cookie was okay, and thank God she was. I scooped her up and ran back to the truck. "We gotta go," I said, stumbling up to the driver's seat. We peeled out onto the road, and I started driving way too fast. 40, 50, 60, which is when I hit a cow. That's right, I hit a cow. Apparently there was a whole herd of cattle crossing the road. Lucky for us, I just barely clipped her head right as she started to cross the road. The poor cow then started to heave, but I knew I couldn't just leave her there in agony. I then got out of the car to cut her throat with this big knife I got from a gas station. And that's when I saw her. The Skinwalker was back. She had followed us, and it was most likely her that had spooked the cattle out into the road in the first place. The rest of the herd took off, and then it was just me, her, and the dying cow on the road. Cookie was going nuts in the back of the truck, and I could hear Lauren gasp as this coyote lady, creature, took a step towards us with her lower jaw still hanging down from her face, and her eyes reflecting the light from the headlights. Just then, another car came up over the rise, and the coyote lady looked up, and I swear it felt like she was staring straight into my soul, before letting out a blood-curdling scream and leaping off the road back into the night. The other car pulled up, and as luck would have it, it was a BLM ranger who had seen us hit the cow. She pulled out her service Glock and put the poor cow out of her misery. I then told her what happened, but she told us it was most likely a coy wolf, a coyote-wolf hybrid that's new to the region. Lauren was in a state of shock, and I didn't want us to get taken off to the loony bin, so I took the ticket for hitting a cow out on open range, and we drove to Hanksville, where we got a room for the night. I couldn't sleep a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I just kept seeing her. And those eyes, those glowing, hypnotic, and yet somehow wild, elegant eyes. I often wonder since then who this woman was. What was she doing out there? Does she fully shift from coyote to woman? Or is she always like that? I have so many unanswered questions. I kinda wanna go out and try to find her again. I just can't stop thinking about her. Sometimes I have dreams about her. What do you think? Should I try to go and find her? Let me know. Upon a recent discussion with an alumnus from a previous supply caravan to Black Mesa on the Navajo REZ, it has come to my attention that one of the gals who accompanied the caravan a couple years ago had a very curious experience. I was able to get her contact info. Let's call her Amanda, and we'll interview her about her encounter. In an effort to be respectful of the culture and the taboo nature of the subject matter, we decided to change the names and category of whatever this is that she experienced down there. Just a bit of background, there is a company called Peabody Coal Mining, which leases tracts of land in and around Black Mesa, and the landscape is one of shadow topographical relief marked by dry draws and arroyos, which are essentially dry creek beds that flood during periods of heavy rain, which, granted, is not a very common occurrence in the high deserts of Arizona. This is what Amanda said. I was trying to retrieve a lamb who had escaped from the enclosure one afternoon. When I turned around, I couldn't seem to retrace my steps back to quote-unquote Johnny's compound, where his parents' hogan is located. I was following one of the arroyos, hoping it would lead me to a road. That's when I started having asthma. I think that I started hyperventilating and had a full-blown panic attack because I lost consciousness, and when I came to it, it was nighttime. I stood up and looked around. I heard something like a twig snapping behind me and turned around to look. In the pale moonlight, I thought I saw something ducked behind a tree. It looked like the dark shape of a person who had been peering around the tree, but then withdrew when I noticed it. But I could tell that it was still there. So I called out, "Hello?" Silence. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm with the Colorado caravan. I think I'm lost." I laughed nervously. "Can you help me?" After a moment or so, this figure peered back around the tree. Only this time, it looked like my friend Charlie from the caravan. The figure then stepped out from behind the tree and motioned me to follow, thinking that Charlie had been sent to bring me back to camp, and still feeling a bit confused. I started to follow the figure back up the draw. We've been walking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes when another figure seemingly materialized from the shadows out in front of us. I felt a bolt of pain, like a severe migraine, and had to stop. When I looked up, there were 3 more figures, and they were standing in a semicircle before me. Now these things did not look human at all, but rather like large coyotes, and I could see 10 eyes looking back at me in the dim silvery light. I started to stumble back, but the coyotes made no move to follow as I turned to run away. I ran for maybe 5 minutes before I stopped to catch my breath. That's when I heard another twig snap and looked back to see one of the coyote-shaped silhouette up on the ridge line from back towards the direction from which I had ran. To my horror, the coyote appeared to stand up on its hind legs and let out a bone, chill and scream. I heard other people describe this before, but it almost sounded like a coyote howl, magnified through a megaphone, and then distorted with a heavy reverb-like sound effect. My head was pounding, but I truly felt in fear for my life, so I kept running. Eventually, I came to a service road and was able to flag down a Peabody mine worker who was driving down the road in a work vehicle. I convinced him to give me a ride and told him our caravan leader, Buck, could explain the situation to his manager if need be. As I climbed into the cab and we started driving, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw those eyes reflecting the red brake lights from the back of the truck. I don't think they followed us, but I couldn't be sure. So when the mine worker dropped me off at the compound, I ran into Johnny's parents' hogan, which is a big no-no for non-natives, but I didn't know where else to go, and I was still very scared. Johnny's parents only spoke Diné, but I was finally able to express the gist of what happened in between broken sobs and sniffling. I saw Johnny's father's face go pale as he realized what I was trying to say. He quickly shushed me and went to look out the window. Johnny's mom went to the stove and collected a small pan of ashes. She then dumped out on the table and started dipping bullets into them, loading them into a .357. She was singing what I can only assume was a Diné prayer for protection and looking worried at me. They let me sleep inside and nothing more happened that night. In the morning they called the medicine man to come and pray over me. We still had a couple nights left but decided to call the trip short after that. Johnny said not to worry, that the walkers wouldn't bother them anymore now that we were leaving, and that he was just glad that I was okay. Suffice to say, I won't be going on any more caravans anytime soon. I know everyone says not to go searching for these things, these skinwalkers. Well, I can't tell you how much I regret not heeding that advice. Now, I spent a considerable amount of time on the Navajo REZ in the past, so I thought I knew what I was doing. It's actually not that hard to find a skinwalker, if you know what you're looking for, and if you do certain things, they'll come to you, as long as you're in one of the active areas. Such areas are in the path of the skinwalker, as it were, where a local clan of skinwalkers will come together to hold council and carry out their various rites and rituals and plan their evil doings. Kayenta, Arizona, is a town on the Navajo Nation at the intersection of Highway 160 and Highway 163. There's a pizza place there called Pizza Edge. Nearby is a car wash and a gas station, as well as a couple other little fast food restaurants. The whole area is just dirt, except for the mentioned highways, which are paved. Anyways, I mention this because that's about all there is to Kayenta. That plus a high school and a couple small hotels, a church, a post office, and a grocery store. The houses consist mainly of Navajo-style hogans and double-wide trailers. It all started in that small downtown area next to the Pizza Edge. As soon as I pulled into the small dirt parking lot, I noticed a Navajo man and a dog sitting in the shade. The man appeared to be asleep, but the dog was looking right at me, only its eyes were strange, vaguely human somehow. It was starting to get dark, so I went in to grab a slice of cheese pizza. When I returned, the dog was next to my car, standing on two legs and trying to get in my open windows. I shouted at the dog, and it dropped back to all fours and scampered off. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got in my car and drove out of town a couple of miles to find a place to park for the night. I had a garbage bag with which I had collected some roadkill along the way. I had found a dead coyote, a couple skunks, a raccoon, and a fox. I placed the dead animals out in a field where two natural draws met to form an open space next to a small pond. I had a hot cup of coffee, and I was ready to stay up all night if need be. At some point, however, I did fall asleep and woke with a start when I realized it was the middle of the night and someone or something was walking around my car. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out the window. Boy, do I wish I hadn't done that. There was that dog again, except it was walking on two legs, peering in at me. I froze up. I couldn't move a muscle. The dog was breathing on the window, causing it to fog up in the light. Its eyes just looked wrong, like a human's eyes in the face of a dog. I jumped into the driver's seat and tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. That thing was trying to open the door, and I could hear it scratching its claws along the side of my car. Finally, the engine turned over, and I was able to start the car. I hit the gas and sped out of there like a bat out of hell. I could see that dog thing in my rear view mirror, still running on two legs, before dropping back down onto all four legs and veering off into the night. I don't know what I was thinking, but that experience really scared me. Don't go looking for these things. They're out there, and they might just have you for dinner. I had been a hunter for most of my life. Leading up to this incident, the smell of the warm air and the beauty of nature always had me at ease. I never felt scared alone at night because I have seen everything there is to be scared of. I have seen bears the size of a small car and animals so vicious they would kill anything that moved. The one thing I was never scared of was deer. I heard the tales of the Skinwalker, the Wendigo, and pretty much anything in between. My uncle was an expert in tracking and hunting. We always went on trips together and would always come back with a fresh kill. He had something about him. It was a rule. I remember it because it was weird. He never wanted to go hunting in winter. I never asked why. I'm not sure, but something about it always had me on edge. One day, it was winter, and I was about to go deer hunting when my uncle stopped at my front door. When he came in, he saw my pack supplies and my rifle, and knew I was about to go hunting. He immediately burst into a raft of anger as he dragged me to a wall and got into my face. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" His spit went all over my face as he looked at me crazy. He looked primal, as if he was fearful of something that he did not want to share. It was the same face you would expect a child to make if they were dumped in the middle of nowhere. The same face of fear that you see in people who have PTSD. I calmly brushed them off and got to the door saying I was going to go hunting. I was not about to fight with my uncle and ruin this trip, as I hadn't gone hunting for close to a month. When you start hunting, you get adjusted to it, and then when you go on breaks, you actually miss it. As I got into my truck, my uncle peered at me out the window. He was there to take care of my house, but before I reversed, he left with the door open. My uncle is prone to outbursts, as I should mention. He's only ever done it a few times, and it's always in a situation where the reaction suits it. Not this one, however. What was so bad about hunting in the winter? The spot I had planned was an isolated one. It was a huge forest area, which I had not been to before. I obviously had mapped the area out and brought essential survival tools in case the worst came, but I never thought I would have to use it after all those years out in the forest. When I arrived, the crisp, cold air immediately saturated me in discomfort. I quickly got another layer of clothes on before I started to walk to where I would set up camp for the night. The clearing I had chosen was a pretty tight one. There was a big tree in the center that stood above the rest. It was called the Forest Star, which suited it. Around the clearing, the forest was extremely dense. Almost no sun shone through the top. There was a small hunting tower north of the entrance of the clearing, so it was a direct walk from camp. As I walked ahead, I noticed something. There were small droplets of blood littering the ground. My first thought was that it must have been an injured animal or something like that, but the droplets were small and almost even. I shook the thought out of my head and made it to my setup, and I started to pin my tent. When I was done, I checked my watch. It was around 5:30 p.m. I had around 2 hours for hunting before it was pitch black, and so I made it to the tower. When I undid my rifle from its case, I heard scampering. Shaking it off, I took my spot and waited. As I stood there, time almost slowed down. I was in a precise focus and was ready for anything. I wasn't ready for what I saw though. Out came 2 small bucks that seemed injured. There were small droplets of blood coming from their eyes. As I focused in, I saw that it wasn't dry blood. It was fresh and it was oozing from their eyes. I was shocked. I had never seen anything like it. Many different scenarios ran through my head. I was thinking, had a hunter shot both of them in the eyes and managed to not kill them? But the scenarios I was coming up with seemed more unlikely than the last. I took aim at the closest one and shot it. It stood there for a second just not moving. Then they trotted off as if nothing happened. Blood was running from the wound, so I know I had obviously hit it. But it didn't seem scared nor fazed. I decided that was enough and sort of jogged to my side. I was freaked out and decided that I would cook dinner and go to bed early. When I scampered around my pack, I pulled out a can of beans. I grabbed a pot and started a fire and began cooking them. As I cracked open a beer, the familiar sound of a branch snapping sounded off next to me. I thought it was maybe a small deer, and I brushed it off as I sat and relaxed. I was thinking about the deer, and I started to chalk it up to the fact I must have not hit it deep enough, and the deer must have been in shock. When I finished eating, I went to bed. I was shivering in the night cold, and I could feel my body shaking uncontrollably. As I dozed off after a brutal 2 hours of cold, I heard another snap. This time, however, it was more loud, like a bear. I immediately grabbed my rifle and went out of my tent. My fire burned low, and in the distance I saw 2 red lights. I walked towards it when my mind started to race. Something felt wrong. As I closed the distance, my gut was literally twisted. My mind was anxious and I felt like I was about to break down. Then I realized what was wrong. Those weren't lights. They were 2 big solid red eyes. They were just orbs hovering. When I realized, I stood frozen. I thought it was a big cat, but what emerged was so much worse. Its fur was black, darker than the night around us. Its antlers were twisted and uneven, but the worst part, it was crying blood. Deep red droplets were pelting down in its unnatural eyes. I couldn't make a sound. I was frozen in fear. Then, it started to make sounds. The sounds of a baby crying. It was horrible. The sounds of unnatural cries filled the cold air, making it worse. My body felt crumple, and so I finally broke out into a sprint. When I looked back, it stood there. It wasn't even breathing, but the sounds of that baby crying weren't fading. It was like a speaker was attached to my ear. When I made it back to camp, I rushed to pack my stuff. In a hurry, I ran, leaving the tent behind, and I rushed to my truck. As I fumbled with the keys, I saw that something was walking slowly towards me. That's when the whispering started. Terrible, faint voices echoed throughout the forest. As my mind started to close, I felt my cerebral melting, as anything I tried to do would not happen. It was like sleep paralysis. As I stood there, I found the strength to finally open the door and get in my car. I slammed the door shut, and that thing was right at the window. I started to sob as I jammed the keys in the ignition. My mind felt fried as I swerved out of there. I didn't care if I hit anything. I just wanted to be away from that thing. And then, before I could back out, it stood up on its legs, and it repeated a voice I recognized.
You did not escape. The forest are mine.
It was my grandpa's voice. He died when I was 6, and I never knew any of the details. The thing then made a terrible shrieking noise that hurt my entire body. As it did so, I heard scampering as more of those things came out. They had blood running from their eyes as well. The baby cry started again, and that's when I finally drove out of that fucking place. When I raced home, I barged into the door. My shoulder ached, but I didn't care. I shoved my door and locked it and ran into my kitchen. That's when I saw my uncle sitting at the table, enjoying a small glass of scotch. So, you saw what I saw, didn't you, Anthony? I couldn't form a single word. I was so shocked. My uncle came up to me and said, "What you saw out there is my rule that I abide by. There are things in those forests in winter that are so horrible that even the most seasoned can't handle it. I saw it when I was a boy, and since then, I will never go hunting during winter." I finally mustered a sentence. What was it? He took a small sip before sitting me down. "You saw something called Urbarak. It's an old, ancient being that dwells in the forest during these winters. Hunters who see it never are the same again, but some never even come home. I was lucky." My uncle sort of sniffled as he told me about his encounter with Urbarak when I was 23. My father and I went out into the woods on a very cold winter to hunt. Our family was struggling, so we didn't have much food. When we were hunting, my father called out to me, but before I could even get to him, I heard him yelled out before he fell silent. I never saw him again, but what stood there was worse than the loss of my own. A deer with red eyes, black fur, and twisted antlers stood there. Blood was running from its eyes. Then it started to cry like a baby. My uncle stopped and had to take a second before continuing. I comforted him as I was teary-eyed. It ran after me, Anthony, on 2 legs. It was like a human, and I rushed to get away from it. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a terrible red scar that ran across the entire underside of his arm. It was trying to feast on me. It knew I feared it, but eventually I managed to lose it. He finally finished his scotch before continuing. I was stuck in the forest for 3 days, fighting to survive. I heard its cries and whispers all around. As I tried to make it out, I finally arrived at a road and was taken in by the police. No trace was found of my father, except for one thing. They found blood at the scene and tested it. It belonged to my father. What was strange about it, it was mixed with his tears. Then my uncle finally stood up. Fear it, for it now knows who you are. Those were his last words. He left my house and the police found him wrapped up in a noose 2 days later. It broke me. My hunting buddy and best friend was gone. There was one detail about his suicide that was never resolved. He had droplets of blood coming from his eyes. The coroner's inspection said it was an aneurysm, but I'm not sure that is the truth. I'm 50 years old now, and I haven't been hunting in 2 decades. I can't even go into the forest anymore. I'm thinking about going back and seeing what Herberak is. Maybe I can kill him. So, beware of Herberak, for he lurks in the forest, out in the cold. I love camping, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for a fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Hell, it was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment, I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded almost like a female, but strange enough, I just couldn't tell. Please help, it continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So, I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from being odd to very, very weird. The police actually told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and maybe needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it, do not respond, and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help," and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went outside to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who were concerned for my safety. But then, I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding.
Quiet.
The other voice demanded.
No one's going to help you.
Once I heard that, I was pretty sure someone was in trouble, so I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack up my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said that a woman could be in serious trouble and that it was their job to help her, but they still refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They actually seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then, a growling,
Quiet. No one's coming.
It was a little past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead became a coward. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. Just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still, nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out there. Regardless, I was still creeped out, so I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger, and we all failed them. To be honest though, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time, along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. However, when I heard it again, for the fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house, I became very, very concerned. I grew up in K-Town on the REZ. One of the guys I knew in school was named Daniel. He was a true jokester. Never a serious moment, always pulling pranks. One day I see him in the cafeteria and I go sit at his table cause it looks like he's troubled. I sat down and was like, "Hey, what's up?" The interrupted story that poured out of him terrified me. Daniel said that he was up at a family sheep camp. He said he was there alone when a coyote that looked as large as a bear came out of hiding behind some pine trees. It looked at Daniel, smiled, and said,
"I'm going to get you, Daniel."
Daniel said that when he heard this, he almost peed on himself and ran close to 13 miles back to town as fast as he could. He said that by the time he reached town, it was dark, and he could hear the coyote yelling far behind him.
"I'm gonna get you, Daniel."
He made it home, jumped in bed and stayed awake in fright for the rest of the night. Then, he said that throughout the night, he could hear that same voice outside his window.
"I'm gonna get you, Daniel."
He told me the story the next day. It was up to that point. The only time I had encountered Daniel to be completely stone cold serious. I offer that maybe one of the medicine men in town can help him. But Daniel was done with the subject from then on. I'm gonna log off till tomorrow night. You all can message me there if anyone is interested in knowing more about this. I want to start the story off by saying that I am Navajo. I live in Utah, and growing up, my family never mentioned skinwalkers or witches to me, so I know nothing about them. My grandpa died just before the summer, so my parents sent me to live with my grandma to help her around her ranch. For company, I brought my cat along with me. He was an orange tabby. We had only been there 2 weeks when my cat went missing. I figured that he would come back, but he never did. I called him and looked for him, but nothing. A few days later, I was bringing some hay out behind the barn when something orange caught my eye. It was the remains of my cat. By the looks of it, he was attacked by something, most likely a coyote. They're all around here. However, when I picked it up, I used a pitchfork, and I immediately noticed that there were no bones. It was just a pile of skin and fur. But I also noticed that there were small splotches of what seemed to be red, yellow, and white paint. At first I thought he might have gotten into something, but the way the paint was on his fur, if you told me someone had put it there on purpose, I'm not sure you would be wrong. Even though there wasn't much left to him, I did love him, and I was heartbroken. So I put his remains in a wood box that my grandmother had in the barn and buried him behind a hill. I marked his final resting spot with a nice stone I found, and so that everyone would know he was there, I painted his name and the date in neat white letters and numbers. Only a couple of nights later, I was hearing just outside the hogan and something scratching at the door. My grandmother, however, doesn't have any other cat, and I don't remember seeing any hanging around the ranch. Regardless, I go over and open the door, or at least look out, and each time there was nothing. After a couple of nights of this, I decided, come the morning, to go check on my cat's grave. When I got out to the hill, I saw that the stone was still in place, and nothing looked disturbed. But something told me it wasn't right. I went back to the barn for a shovel, and came back and carefully dug up the grave. I removed the box, and before opening it, said a little prayer. When I took off the lid, you can imagine my surprise when his fur and skin were gone, and instead, the box now contained his bones. At least I thought they were his. I just couldn't believe it. I know for a fact that when I buried that box, it was with fur and skin, and not a bone in sight. I wish I could say that this incident was the only strangeness that I experienced while living there, but it's not. As a result, my respect for the Navajo Nation, what the elders say, and for skinwalkers has now grown. I'm not saying I was involved with one, but now I really believe and know why our elders don't talk about them. What I will tell you is, don't seek them out. Stop researching about them. Stop thinking about them. You're basically inviting them into your life, because even with small attention that you give them, they will come looking for you. I'm not Navajo, or Native, or even Indian, but I have a Skinwalker story. so here it goes. I go along with a friend to check out his grandfather's hogan. For those who don't know, a hogan is basically an old traditional Navajo dwelling place, mostly made out of logs and mud, with a door traditionally facing east. Anyways, his grandfather is in the hospital for a spell. My friend says that his grandfather had an accident there on the property. We get to the place and we're hanging out for a while, drinking some beers and sharing a blunt, when out of nowhere, my friend goes real still and puts his finger up to his lips like he wants me to be quiet. I hear this shuffling noise coming from just outside, and just an FYI, my friend has dark skin. So as I look at him, his face turns several shades more pale. The shuffling noise becomes more loud, as if someone is coming towards the door. My friend grabs a piece of burning firewood out of the stove. He goes over to the door and hurls it out in front of the hogan. We then hear it hit the ground, and immediately there is this high-pitched laughter, something like the Wicked Witch of the West. Every hair on my body stands up. My friend starts yelling out in some native language. All I can do is pull out my pocket knife and hold it up to be ready. The person outside just keeps laughing, and I finally get the cojones to move over towards the door and peek out. My heart nearly jumps out of my chest. Only several feet from me is this Skinwalker. It's leaning up against the wall just to the right, thin and scraggly, covered with these animal skins, and staring back at me with these eyes like black marbles. I'm convinced it's a woman, as I see what looks to be breasts beneath the skins, but thin and sagging, like she's really old. Her face is covered with splotches of hair, and I can't tell if it's real or some kind of get-up. I let out a bit of scream, though I hate to admit it, and it just turns and jogs off towards the hills to the other side of the hogan. That's the only time I've seen a skinwalker since, and I hope I never see one again. I grew up in Winslow, Arizona, but also lived for a period of time on the reservation near the Puerto River. My grandparents have a home which is more to the east and not all that far from the New Mexico state line. When my mother and aunts were children, they lived further west. Their house was in a wooded area, and though there were neighbors, there wasn't that many. When I was young, I often heard stories of skinwalkers, but never really believed until I got older, and after my grandmother, a Christian woman, not prone to superstition or telling lies, shared with me and my cousins an encounter that occurred when my mother and her sisters, my aunts, were still small children. They were living at the time in a 3-bedroom house, full wood construction, surrounded by a small fence, and with chicken wire around the front porch. One night, when all the children are in bed, and my grandfather is off working, she is awakened by a noise that she hears outside. She gets up out of bed, and in the dark, makes her way out to the living room. It is then that she hears something up on the roof of the house. She said that she knows immediately what it is. Her first instinct is to go out to the front porch and curse the creature that has picked her and her family as a target. As she makes her way to the front door, she hears it walking around over her head. Then, as soon as she starts to open the door to go out, she hears it jump down by the side of the porch, open the porch door, come up to the steps, and right up to the kitchen window, only about 10 feet away from where my grandmother is standing. She says that she is really scared now, but as the porch light is on, she thinks that she can take a peek through the window and see what is out there. Just as she starts to pull aside the curtain, her whole body freezes, as if she has no control over it whatsoever. However, she can hear just fine, and whatever is out there on the porch starts to scratch at the kitchen window. as if it's trying to get into the house. My grandmother says she starts praying and asking God to make whatever it is go away. And this is before she becomes a Christian. Finally, the creature gives up and leaves. Once it is gone, my grandmother is able to move again. She says she knows it was a skinwalker. Her own mother had often shouted into the night, and her father would shoot with a shotgun into the darkness whenever a skinwalker came around their whole gun. The next morning, when my grandfather comes home from work, she tells him what happened. He takes the ladder and goes up into the roof and discovers a bundle of dry grass and twigs placed there alongside of the chimney. He tells her that the skinwalker might have wanted to start a fire in order to get her and the girls out of the house. Later that day, one of the older men from the reservation comes by the house and puts ash over the doorway. Even to this day, my grandmother swears that she knows who that skinwalker was. But what's more weird or strange is that she's never told us, and even now she won't say who it was. In Arizona, there is an older woman who lives not far from my grandmother's house. She works about halfway to Gallup, New Mexico, maybe about 20 minutes away from my grandmother's house. On cold mornings, she gets up before the sun to start her car and let it warm up before she makes the drive. Her house is surrounded by a dark wood fence, which is about 5 feet tall. This one morning, as she is making her way out to the car, she hears voices that seem to be chanting and giggling. She thinks they are coming from over by this low hill to the east of her house and back from the road. She walks over to the fence and takes a look, but it's still dark and the hill is covered with trees and bushes. She doesn't see anything or anyone, and the voices have stopped. She doesn't give it another thought, goes about her usual morning routine, and eventually leaves for work. A few nights later, she is bringing in her laundry from the outside line when she hears really loud music coming from the neighbor's yard across the street. She decides to be nosy and walks over to the fence to see which one of the boys it is, thinking that maybe she can ask him to lower the volume some. Just as she gets to the fence, she sees a dark figure step from the trees on that low hill and make its way down towards the street. It's moving kind of funny, as if it's not accustomed to its own body. She screams, and it starts to run really fast towards the young man playing the boombox. He must have heard her, because she says he lowered the volume. However, when she turns back around to see where the figure has gone to, it's now gone. She says that she was certain that it was a skinwalker. I myself am not Navajo, but my friend is. He grew up around Gallup, New Mexico. He loves to tell me stories about skinwalkers. He knows it gives me the chills. According to him, they are not like werewolves, but are dark spirits that use the skins or even the flesh of anything living that may serve its purpose. They will also use animal parts as totems. For example, they will take the claws from a bear or the antlers from a deer. They are known to come after humans too, but he says that's a native thing and that white people have nothing to worry about. He says the only way to make it stop bothering you is to take away its disguise. The scariest story he tells is about this Navajo trucker that his father knows. Every night he makes the long run to the reservation from Gallup. One night, when halfway there, he hears a loud noise against the front passenger side of his truck. Thinking he might have hit something, he pulls off to the shoulder of the road to take a look, but he finds nothing, not even a mark or dent on the fender. So he gets back on the road and resumes driving. But only a few seconds later, he sees something in his rear view mirror towards the middle of the road. and moving up on him, and it's not another vehicle. Then, just as suddenly as it appears, it's gone. Shrugging it off, he goes back to paying attention to the road, with his semi going about 60 miles per hour. He chances to look in his mirror, and again, he sees this thing chasing him, and it is moving fast. Just like that, it's at his driver's door, and holding onto the handle and striding along. Then, without warning, it turns to him with its dog-like face and dull, dark eyes, and smashes in the window. The driver slams on the brakes. The cab of the truck goes into a slide, the trailer jackknifing past him. The whole time, this creature is holding on to the door and reaching in through the broken window trying to grab him. Somehow, the truck comes to a stop, blocking both lanes of the road straight across. The driver is so scared, he doesn't even notice the creature is gone, and instead throws the door open and runs off into the desert. Now, he must have passed out or something, because he awakes with the sun coming up and finds himself huddled by this rock formation. He's dusty, a little dirty, and missing his shirt, but is otherwise unharmed. Sitting there gaining his bearings, the events of the previous night come back to him. He gets up to his feet, dusts himself off, and walks out back to the highway, not knowing what to expect with his truck. However, as he reaches the road, he sees it parked as neat as it can be there on the shoulder. When he gets up to it, he sees there's nothing wrong with the driver's door window. It's as if he imagined the whole thing. He does notice, however, a series of small scratches on the driver's door all around the handle, as if something was clawing at it. These marks were not there previously.
I have never shared a story with anyone before, in the hopes that you all get a glimpse of what actually goes on in the REZ from someone who actually went and experienced something. But I'll cut to the chase. I got to be part of a Navajo ceremony not long ago. It was for a book that me and some friends were working on. In the end, it ended up being one of the most meaningful events of my life, and I feel very blessed to have been able to experience it. There's just one small problem. The people I work with aren't big believers in the sort of thing, and I don't really have friends outside of work, and I don't really have family. I mean, I do, but that's actually a long story. Basically, I have nobody to talk to about my experience, but maybe you'll be kind enough to listen while I ramble a bit. Or maybe you won't, and that's fine too. Either way, it's always useful to put pen to paper, so let me start from the beginning. It was spring, a couple of years ago. Me and some friends are working on a short textbook for students containing interviews with Native Americans from different tribes. I happen to be the natural pick for the Navajo, since I recently completed a brief assignment there. On that assignment, I became friends with a guy that I'm gonna call Bill. Bill is actually young, but he's actually pretty close with the tribal leadership. He'll be an asset to me on this new project, so I reach out to him one morning. I'm wondering if he can get me in touch with some interesting tribal members. His response surprises me. "Hey, it's funny you call. Someone actually wants to meet you." Well, that's a happy coincidence. Bill says that there's this medicine man. I'll call him Jordan. Jordan randomly approached Bill a few days ago. He told Bill he was holding a special ceremony and asked Bill to ask me to attend. For context, I never even met this medicine man. In fact, I barely even know Bill, other than as a contact. So naturally, I'm asking, why would you want me? And Bill has no clue. "Hey man, he just told me to reach out to you." So I ask when the ceremony is being held, and he responds, "A couple of weeks from now." That's a lot sooner than I thought. At first, I thought I might not be able to make it, but keep in mind, I'm an academic. Publish or perish is the motto. Not only that, but Navajo medicine men are known for being private. A first-hand look at a Navajo ceremony with a real medicine man. Now that's a good opportunity. It could be a real highlight of the book. Who knows? Maybe it'll open doors for me. I'm picturing lectures and paid speaking engagements. I'm exaggerating a bit, but you get the picture. I want to contribute something good. So I tell Bill, I'll be there. Just tell me where I need to be. So Bill actually gives some very complicated directions. I jot them down. A week later, I'm barreling through the Navajo Nation in my old Jeep. Following Bill's directions, I turn off the main highway. From there, it's a long drive through the middle of nowhere. It'll be a couple of hours before I get anywhere near where the ceremony is going to be held. The Jeep bounces along, kicking up dust the whole way. In the meantime, I'm trying to read these confusing directions based on the geographical landmarks. I'm reading them as I'm driving, but also keeping my eyes peeled. I'm looking for a hogan. And in case you didn't know, these things can blend into the desert real easy. I'll attach a picture so that you all can see. I don't want to miss it, but before I know it, daylight is beginning to disappear. Now I'm getting worried. This is actually taking more than a couple of hours. I'm starting to think maybe I took a wrong turn somewhere. I'm secretly cursing Bill and his awful directions. So the sun is beginning to set. I just about resigned myself to a night of sleeping in my Jeep when I see it off in the distance to my left. It's a hogan for sure. I make a beeline towards it by the last light of day. My Jeep rolls to a stop. As the sun sinks below the horizon, the desert goes dark. I breathe a sigh of relief. Later on, I note that this is the first moment when I felt that something wasn't quite right. I'm relieved to find the hogan, of course, but in my stomach, I feel butterflies, and not the good kind. So I do something weird. I sit there. I don't get out. I don't even move. After all of the rush of getting my bags packed, emailing my department about the trip, getting some of my responsibilities covered by other people, and hauling gas through the middle of nowhere, I'm actually debating about going inside. Why am I hesitating? After some time, the academic side of me wins. Snap out of it, kiddo. You got some work to do. I chalk up my hesitation to excitement jitters. I step out of the Jeep and it finally hits me. I'm about to be a witness to a special Navajo ceremony. I find myself wondering the same thing I asked Bill when he first called me. Why was I even invited here? I pause in the darkness, staring at the little mound of a building that I'm about to enter. Before I do, a scene plays out in my mind. I enter the hogan, and an open fire burns in the center. Around in a crowd of silent Navajo men sit in their rustic clothing. The medicine man is in a traditional Navajo garb. The flickering light casts its shadows on their faces. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. But anyways, by now, I know better than to expect these cliches. In fact, there's no open fire. No silence. Instead, I find the men talking cheerfully, wearing everyday clothes. A few of them have on cowboy hats. They're swapping stories and don't even acknowledge me when I come in. I sit down by the entrance. The women are mixing cornmeal and water. Then they grab palm-sized scoops out of the mix and roll them into balls into the center of the hogan, where I expected the open fire. But instead, there's a small oven with a big stone griddle on the stovetop. The women slap the cornmeal balls flat onto the hot stone. They sizzle. The aroma is amazing. I'm reminded that I actually haven't ate in several hours. A woman offers me a bowl of steaming food, and then the grilled cornmeal cakes start coming off the griddle. One of the women hand me one, and I begin to stuff my face. As I begin to eat, one of the men says something. It must be funny because all the others start to laugh. And then there's this one older man who lets out this big, booming laugh. And just like that, I'm back with my grandparents. So let me give you some background on my grandparents. My grandpa was a big bear of a man, enormous hands, big snow white beard like Santa Claus. Grandma, on the other hand, was a small southern woman, very outdoors. She had a garden that I helped her tend. In the summer, it was packed with cucumbers and tomatoes, and all kinds of other veggies. That grandma would turn everything into soup. She actually baked cornbread too, and it's still one of my favorite meals. As the aroma filled the kitchen, Grandpa would steal me away. He would take me under the sycamore and tell me stories. In a way, my grandpa was a very old world guy who knew a lot about spooky folklore. Most of the stories he told me involved trolls and elves. He used to tell me the story that I remember so much. As a boy, Grandpa and his friends would spend hours in the woods back in his hometown, not in the US. One day, they found something in a clearing in the trees. This specific area of the woods was not unfamiliar to them, but none of them had ever seen this clearing before. It was like someone just came in overnight and cut down a circle of trees in the middle of the forest. Only the clearing was totally flat and grassy like nothing had ever grown there. And in the center stood these very big stones, taller than any of the boys. There were 6 stones total, covered in moss. Grandpa and his friends went up to touch them. They noticed that the stones had big ugly faces carved into them. They had noses, a mouth, eyes, and ears. One of the boys said that they are trolls. This idea scared them, and they all took off running for home, scared, but laughing. The next day they teased each other about being scared of the stones. They decided to go back, but they could never find a clearing again. They looked around for months without luck. Eventually, they just gave up. Grandpa would end the story by pointing to the woods surrounding the house, and he would say, "Those trolls are still out there somewhere." Then he tells me that the trolls always turn to stone in the light of the sun, but at night, the spell was lifted. The trolls would wake up in the moonlight, stretch their limbs, and shamble down the mountains. They moved quietly through the towns, and if you ran into one, best of luck. That troll had found its meal for the night. These stories spooked me pretty good when I was a kid. Grandpa knew this, so he would always finish by reassuring me, in the middle of the day, the trolls are asleep. There's no need to worry. Besides, I'm here to keep you safe. I always felt safer when he was around. He told me tons of other stories like this, always from his life back home, and most of them involved magic. And being a little curious kid, I wanted to know if magic was actually real. So one time I asked him. Keep in mind, my grandpa had a funny way of putting things. I can't remember the exact words that he used, but I do remember the essence of what he said. So I asked him, "Is magic real?" And he says, "Magic actually works backwards. You have to believe in it before it becomes real." Obviously that confused me, so instead, I asked him if he believed in magic. You know how some people forget their dreams when they wake up, and then they claim that they don't dream, but they do. They just forgot. What the heck? Now I'm even more confused. So I would pester him about it all the time. "Do you believe in magic, Grandpa? Yes or no?" People who don't believe in magic are like sleepers who don't dream. It was always something like that. Nowadays, I find those responses kind of funny and kind of beautiful in a way, but at that time, I wasn't sure what the hell he was talking about. So the days would pass like this. Grandpa would tell me stories for hours. Then Grandma would come outside. She would bring iced tea bowls of soup, a plate pile high with cornbread. We would sit together under the sycamore and hold hands. Grandpa would say grace, then we would eat right there on the ground. Grandma would pile extra pieces of cornbread onto my plate as I ate. She tells me all about how well the garden grew that year compared to other years. Grandpa would make jokes. His huge laugh would ring through the air. And this is how I spent the best days of me being a kid. They were my family. They were my home. My memories of those days are still vivid in my mind, after all this time. But the year I turned 13, Grandma got sick. She was in the hospital for weeks before she passed. Grandpa took it hard. It almost seemed like her dying drove him a little crazy. He started forgetting things. His stories became less exciting, and they all ended very sad now. He would barely even laugh, and not long afterwards, he passed away too. So I went to live with my dad, and to be honest, he's not important. The only thing you need to know about him is that he wasn't really around for much of me being a kid. Even after I moved in with him, he was never home. The house was always empty. It was just me and the internet. And fuck, I miss my grandparents badly. I fucking miss the garden, and the stories, and the laughing. I didn't feel at home where I was. My dad wasn't much of a role model either, but I won't go into that. So I made a choice. I didn't want to live there anymore. I didn't want to end up like my dad. Somehow, I would move away and never come back. So I put my head down and focused on school. I got a job at 15 and began saving up my money. Eventually, I graduated. My grades were very high, and I made it into the university. My home life made me qualify for financial aid, as well as tons of other grants. It helped me get started on my road in academia. I used my savings to buy a Jeep that some old dude was selling on the cheap. And then when the next semester rolled around, I was going off to college. The house was empty as always. My dad wasn't there to see me off, and to be honest, I wasn't surprised. But still, it did hit me kinda hard. I was losing my second home now. My first home, my real one, I lost when my grandparents died. Now, I was turning my back on my dad and this empty house. The future was wide open, but I was scared. But I still hit the road. I didn't know where home was at, but I know it wasn't here. And I'm sorry, I'm writing this in between a few things. I guess I'm getting sidetracked. But now that I think about it, this is the first time I really gotten a chance to think about these things. So I guess my mind is all over the place. But anyways, let me get back to it. So somehow, all of that led me to this place in the middle of the desert, inside a hogan, full of people I never met, eating their food and about to witness a ceremony that many outsiders never even get to see. People are laughing, and I'm shoving cornmeal cakes into my mouth. My butt is planted on the dusty floor. It's just like when I was a kid. But then, something happens. Remember those butterflies I felt in my stomach when I first showed up? They're back. Except that now, they're pissed off. At first I'm like, fuck, I must be eating too fast. My stomach feels pinched. I slow my chewing, but I think it's too late. Before long, it feels like a dozen snakes are wrestling inside my guts as I try to keep it together. That's when I noticed him. A slim man, across the hogan from me. Without taking his eyes off of me, he slips a chunk of wood into the belly of the oven. He gives me a curious look, then he lowers his gaze and stares into the fire. Bill never described him to me, but somehow, I know this must be Jordan. He's actually very young, and he's wearing a beat-up ball cap. Not what you would expect from a medicine man at all. A woman takes my empty bowl of food. Jordan pulls out a small box and opens it. The hogan goes silent. Jordan pulls 2 small bundles from out of the box, one for protection and one for blessings. He later told me the following, but I'll tell you right now. It turns out that Jordan is here to help out a man named Leonard, and I'll call him Leo for short. Leo has been having terrible nightmares. They started just a couple of months ago, and these nightmares are always the same. Leo finds himself in some isolated area. He comes upon a campfire, and the flames burn black like charcoal. Leo says that the fire gives off an eerie glow. The sight of it always strikes fear into Leo. He wakes up from these nightmares covered in sweat. He says it's always the same. His dreams of the black fire, and then when he wakes up, There's a strange smell in the room, pungent, but not unpleasant. Leo can't identify it. Sometimes he's up for an hour or so, unable to fall back asleep. During these times, the smell doesn't go away. Leo passes out, and when he wakes up in the morning, the pungent smell is gone. At this point, Leo's mother chimes in. She says that her son began to change when the dream started. He's always been a quiet, serious young man, but he's become paranoid and violent, and he's always angry. He's not the same person he used to be. It's like the dreams are changing him. She says that not long ago, she actually wanted to pay her son a visit. She walked as she normally does, and as she got closer, she could see from a distance that someone was outside of Leo's home. She said that this person seemed to be peering into the house through the front window. It was kind of late and somewhat dark outside. She said she couldn't tell who the stranger was, but she thought it was a friend that was going to check on her son. But then, as she got closer, and this is when she stopped talking, and I could see that there are tears in this old woman's eyes as she was trying to speak. And then she looked around and looked at me. There's a long silence, and then Leo says that he saw it from inside the house as well. But this is the weird thing, that none of them seem to want to say what it was. But at the same time, I'm looking around, and everybody in the Hogan seems to understand. It's almost like they know what's being discussed, without anybody actually saying it. I look at Jordan for answers, but he doesn't speak. He just stares into the fire that burns in the oven. After a long silence, he does something unexpected. He begins to sing. It's out of nowhere, and I almost jumped in my seat. And as he sings, he pulls out this small pouch. He reaches in with his fingers and sprinkles some powder over the flames in the oven. I quickly know what it is. It's cedar. The aroma is pleasant, but I look over at Leo, and he reacts strangely. His body becomes tense. He seems dazed, with his jaw slack and his head tilting back. He almost looks like he's been knocked out cold, except that his lips are moving, which reminds me of my old roommate who used to mumble in his sleep. Jordan keeps singing, and the song is beautiful. Soon, despite Leo's weird trance, I'm pulled into Jordan's song. This next part is hard to describe. I'm not sure if maybe I went into a trance too, but as I was listening to Jordan singing, the sound of his voice seemed to quiet everything. I began to feel the music in my ears, then my chest. Then, it seemed to resonate throughout the wooden frame of the Hogan itself. The only thing I can liken to it now is that feeling of being next to a speaker when it's blasting music. It wasn't exactly like that, but similar. At this point, it seems that Jordan's singing seemed to be literally all around me. It seemed to be coming out of the walls. I could almost see it like the Hogan was moving itself. Like I said, it's hard to explain. It seemed to only last a few moments. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Jordan's voice grew quiet, and then he pulled out a pipe and began to stuff it with tobacco. He took a few, and then with one last big puff, blew a huge cloud, and pulled out the smoke with his fingers, hanging himself all over with it. And then he took one last puff, and this time he blew the smoke all over Leo. And as he did this, Leo seemed to come out of his trance. His eyes were wild, like he had just woken up from a terrible dream. The pipe went around the room, and everyone followed Jordan's example. When the pipe came to me, I blew a cloud of smoke and patted myself all over with it, similar to the way that Jordan did. As I did this, I heard a knock at the small door of the Hogan. Everybody went silent. Something was skittering around outside. I naturally thought this was an animal that was trying to get in, but there were more knocks, and they were coming from different sides of the Hogan. Jordan then put his hand on Leo's head and started to pray. I then began to feel strange, For the record, I did dabble in drugs while in college, but never to a significant degree. My classmates all smoked pot, a few others took shrooms, but I never wanted to mess with that stuff, because to be honest, my dad was a fuck up, and I was worried about becoming like him. With that said, during a deep period of depression, I smoked pot twice, and I took shrooms once, but I never messed with alcohol, so I'm very familiar with the sensations, both positive and negative. I'm familiar with the off feeling of a bad trip, and to be honest, for a moment, I did wonder if Jordan just had to smoke something, but what I felt was not like that. It didn't feel like a high, or a chemical sensation. It didn't feel like a bad trip either, even though I was beginning to feel scared. It was something else, something familiar, something I hadn't felt in a long time. At that point, the butterflies returned, and they hit me like a truck. My stomach was starting to jump all over the place. I once heard someone describe their food poisoning experience as their stomach feeling like a sack full of cats. That's what this felt like. I felt very ill. I tried to get a grip. I tried to tense up my stomach and get the sensation under control, but I could tell I was about to throw up. I was breaking out into a bad sweat, and nobody seemed to notice. Nobody, except Jordan. I found myself staring into his eyes. After the ceremony, Jordan would explain it all to me. However, the ceremonial smudge is different. How people react well to the tobacco, and that's a good thing. But when it doesn't sit well with people, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that the spirits are working on them in an uncomfortable but necessary way. The medicine man pays attention to these things. He watches carefully. Then he picks out the appropriate prayers based on what he sees. Jordan also tells me that on most occasions, everyone in the ceremony reacts the same way to the tobacco. Either the smudge goes well and everyone feels peaceful, or else the smudge makes everyone feel sick. It's one or the other. But what is strange is for the smoke to single out one person. If it was gonna be anybody, it should have been Leo. The ceremony was for him after all, and that's when Jordan began to suspect that he had been right to invite me. He explains all this to me later in private, but in that moment, I'm clueless. All I'm thinking is I'm gonna shit my pants, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm practically belly dancing in my seat at this point. The others are starting to notice, and the knocking at the hogan has started to match the feeling in my stomach. It's gotten violent. Then Jordan lets out a piercing scream, and it all goes away. The sound of his voice settles my stomach. It's like it shoots through me, pulls out the board of snakes wrestling in my stomach. I have no other words for it. It's like someone unclogged the drain. I let out a huge sigh. I have sweat dripping down my face, my chest, and my back. The others are looking at me now. They must be wondering what the hell Jordan was thinking by inviting this non-native man into their bed. Leo is still in his own world, oblivious to me or the pounding on the walls. He's rocking back and forth. Jordan looks concerned. He passes something else around the room. It's a small bag or pouch. Each person pulls something out of it and then passes it to the next person. When it comes to me, I reach in and find that it's full of arrowheads. For the first time, someone speaks to me. The woman to my left leans over and whispers, "Don't let it touch the ground." I notice that she's eyeing me with concern. I must look like a mess. I pass the pouch to the next person, clutching my arrowhead. I'm not gonna let it touch the ground. Jordan is back to singing. His voice still seems to resonate in the walls. But to be honest, I don't know if I'm just being delirious. But there's definitely somebody or something outside. There are heavy footsteps moving around the hogan, and whatever it is, it's big. Jordan throws more cedar on the flames. Its aroma fills the space again. I inhale it. It feels good. I breathe in through my mouth to taste it. Weird, I know, but it made sense to me at that time. As I'm swallowing the cedar, I feel my throat begin to feel funny. kind of prickly. Then it closes up. It's a feeling I know very well. Jordan keeps adding cedar to the fire, and for the first time, I see some urgency in his movements. Now, he keeps glancing up as the knocking on the hogan moves from one side to the other. Another pouch goes around the room. Everyone else seems nervous. They're dipping their fingers into the pouch and streaking what looks like a white powder over their faces like war paint. Meanwhile, the tightness in my throat has given way to a rising lump. This is what the butterflies were warning me about. And Jordan's voice is basically thundering at this point. He then holds up his arrowhead as the knocking on the walls grows louder. I can see that Leo's eyes are open, but nobody's home. Jordan then makes a gesture in the air with his arrowhead. Instantly, Leo lets out a huge sigh. He almost falls over like a deflated balloon. He wobbles for a bit. Then he looks around the room at us. His eyes are back to normal now. Meanwhile, the lump in my throat is about to burst. There's a sudden pounding on the hogan door. For the first time, I hear Jordan's voice start to crack. He glances over at me. I'm sitting in front of the entrance. The door is right behind me. I hear something that sounds like scraping or scratching. The wind outside is howling now. Maybe it's the strength of the wind, drowning everything out. But Jordan's voice is starting to sound weak. Then, something happens that sends the ceremony everywhere. There's another heavy pounding at the door. The wind picks up. There's a pop. And just like that, the door is thrown open by the wind. It slams open and shut in the blast. At that moment, the lump in my throat breaks, and tears flood my eyes. The women begin to scream. The men are shouting. The gust circles through the hogan. The fire starts to struggle, and Jordan's voice is barely even heard now, but his eyes continue fixed on me. He raises his voice and continues to sing, and the whole time I'm just crying. It's like years of sadness are pouring out of me. I'm crying like a baby, thinking about my dad, about the empty house with nobody in it but me. I think about my grandparents, and how they left me when they died. They were my home. In the midst of the chaos, the wind is tearing through the hogan. All of these different thoughts are raging inside of me. And then, just like that, everything is calm. The wind seems to literally sink into the ground. It's gone. I feel someone lay a hand on my shoulder. It's a large, heavy hand. I don't dare turn around. I'm afraid of what I'll see. I keep looking at Jordan, whose song is now ringing through the air again. It fills the space and resonates in the walls. I can feel it all around me. The tears are still running down my face. I feel something that I haven't felt in a very long time. I feel like I'm with my grandpa again. It comes from out of nowhere, but it feels completely real. I know he's gone, but I have this distinct feeling that he's right there. That it's his hand on my shoulder. All the anger I felt about him dying and leaving me behind, it all goes away, and all I can think about is how sorry I am. I feel bad for blaming him, and I actually want him to know that. Jordan is still singing, and I blink, and I look around, and everyone is looking in my direction. They're looking over my shoulder. There's a long moment when I'm just watching all of them. Then, they all bow their heads. Everyone except Jordan, who keeps his eyes fixed on something behind me. The hogan is resonating with his song again. The song is beautiful, and it feels warm in my ears. The feeling I mentioned, the one I haven't felt in a long time, it's a sense of connection. I feel connected with everyone there. Even though I don't know anybody, I feel connected to my grandfather. I could feel his presence. He's in the room with me. I know it. I keep my eyes on Jordan, but I lift my hand up and reach back. I touch the hand resting on my shoulder. The hand is solid. It's real. And it's warm. Jordan throws a fistful of cedar into the fire, and I feel the hand grow warmer. Outside, it begins to rain. The flames of the fire are raging again, and Jordan's eyes are staring into mine. He's singing with a smile on his face. The hogan feels like it's breathing all around me, and for the first time that night, I speak out loud. I tell my grandpa that I love him, and Jordan's song is filling my ears again, and in the song, I can hear a voice that sounds like my grandpa's voice. By the time Jordan finishes his song, my grandfather's hand is growing cold. Then it fades, and the hogan is quiet for the first time since I arrived. The ceremony comes to an end sometime in the early morning hours. By the time that everyone leaves, the sun is rising. Despite the hell of a night I just had, I don't lose sight of my duties. I still need that interview for the book. Jordan is actually wide awake, so I interview him just outside the hogan. It's during this interview that he talks about the smudge and explains the purpose of the arrowheads in the face paint. But the question that was really burning in my mind was the one that had been there since I talked with Bill. Why was I invited? A non-native man and a total stranger. So Jordan told me when Leo's mother approached them about holding a special ceremony for her son, Jordan agreed to do the ceremony. He did what he always did. He prayed for guidance, and that night, he had a dream. In the dream, a creature was prowling around the hogan. Jordan was sitting inside, and a white man he had never met confronted the creature. When Jordan woke up, he wondered what this dream meant, so he prayed. Long story short, Jordan learned that the creature was the evil spirit that was afflicting Leo, and that it actually wasn't native. He said it was brought over by a non-native for some reason that he didn't make clear. Jordan knew that he needed to call upon non-native spirits to help him manage this thing, whatever it was, and without it, the ceremony would fail. From his prayers, Jordan understood that Bill was somehow connected to the white man from his dream. He also knew that I would be calling Bill, so he told Bill to invite me. When I showed up, Jordan thought that he had made a mistake. I wasn't the white man from his dream, but it was too late to do anything about it, and he carried out the ceremony as planned. When the evil spirit forced its way into the hogan, that violent wind that blew the door open, Jordan believed it was going to kill him, but then he saw that something was protecting me, though he couldn't see what it was at first, but he knew it was a spirit of some sort. Jordan then interrupted himself and asked if I knew what these ceremonies were called. I told him I wasn't sure, and he said, "We call these ceremonies sings, because the singing is crucial." He told me that songs are like food for the spirits. The same way that a good meal can comfort you or make you happy, the right song can give certain helpful spirits and make them stronger. Jordan felt the evil enter the hogan, trying to put out the fire, and if the fire had gone out, it would have been all over. But Jordan was focused on me and on my protector, and he sang a song to give his strength. He was at that point that he knew for sure that I was the person he had meant to invite, because as he sang, the spirit behind me took the shape of a man. It was the man from Jordan's dream. It was my grandpa. As soon as he appeared, the evil spirit fled. I asked Jordan why this was, and he shrugged. That was for the great spirit to know. But in his own experience, only good spirits that have intimate knowledge of bad spirits can chase them away. Maybe your grandfather encountered the spirit while he was alive, Jordan suggested. And then Jordan pointed out something else. The great spirit had used him to heal not just one person that night. First it was Leo, and then me. He told me that he noticed I had reacted badly to the smudge. That only happened because there was a deep cut inside of me that had never healed. My grandpa's spirit was there. When I smudged myself, I had allowed my grandpa to begin healing the wound. Later, after the evil spirit had fled, Jordan had stepped in and finished what my grandpa started. He closed all the wounds. I will forever be grateful to Jordan. There's more to the story, but I think I said everything I needed to say. I lost my family and my home, when I was a kid. In a way, I lost myself after that. I grew bitter. I stopped dreaming. And I lost my faith. So I know I said this in the beginning that I wanted to make a few things clear about what goes on in the REZ. But I also wanted to share this story for those who have lost their faith. Anyways, I want to extend my love and gratitude to everyone that is listening to my story. I'll always be grateful for that.